be here.
So, Leon, I was thinking we start with one of these softer topics to get warmed up. What do you think?
Yeah, we could do that. Did you have anything in mind, or did any of the guests have something in mind?
I thought the Ring one was interesting. Did you guys get a chance to take a look at that?
Yeah, I
The Ring
did.
camera?
As creepy as can be, man.
Yeah.
Do any of you have these cameras in your phone, in your house? Like, I feel weird about putting a camera in my living room.
I said to myself, I can see how that can get hacked, because I have hard wiring in my home, because I don't trust the I don't trust the Wi-Fi, and I don't want the data from my camera to be accessible anywhere, even including on my phone. So basically, that prevents it from being hacked, and I don't have to worry about things like that. Now, of course, my route is a little bit more expensive, but to me, it gives me more of a peace of mind.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So this is the story about how about the Ring security camera that was in the child's room that was hacked by somebody who then pretended to be Santa Claus. Although, I mean, to be clear, we don't know who did it yet, right? So we don't know. It may have actually been Santa Claus. But
True.
I mean, but barring that, though, it was really creepy. Like somebody pretending to, and telling the child to do, destructive things and such. So it was like super creepy. And yeah, but then the Ring company said our security wasn't compromised in this incident. So maybe it was just a hacked password. I don't know.
This has actually happened several times, and that's been their excuse every time it's happened.
Oh, I see.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, when I read the headline, I laughed, and my stream was like, "That's not funny." But I guess I envisioned like me calling, because we have Alexa everywhere, so I assumed, right? That,
I don't have
I would
Alexa. That's another thing. I don't do Alexa. I don't have any of those listening devices in my home.
You remember in like the early 2000s, people would be like, the government's gonna start listening to us. The government's and now people are like, oh yeah, let me just have microphones and cameras.
Yeah, I don't do that. Yeah, exactly.
so
Like
convenient.
people are selling that data. They want that.
You can have my information, you can have my data. I understand it has some value, and hopefully Andrew Yang can get me a check for it. But when the reason why I laughed was because we have a 10-year-old, my girlfriend's 10-year-old lives here, and I imagined, prank calling them, and I thought it would be hilarious. Then I watched this footage, and it's a little disturbing, right? It's like, do you want to be my friend? And I'm like, oh no, this is terrifying.
I'm gonna make a joke about magic and not believing in it, but that's creepy.
Yeah. It was like he was trying to have the creepiest voice possible too.
Yeah, this could have gone a lot darker, and the little girl was actually like really well raised, because she immediately went running for her dad and yelling for him. But this could have been a lot worse. And Tree actually does bring up a really good point, that wireless systems are inherently less secure than wired systems. And that's actually not just like at a level of like home security. There's also a level at talking about like automation and industrial systems that are also going wireless, which is great because it's convenient, but it also becomes a lot more disruptive, right? Mm-hmm. At any point, a wireless system, like you could probably do some sort of like machine learning algorithm to learn like the signals and the frequency and everything and hack that way. Pretty much just hijack a signal.
Even just electronic voting machines, right, which have become like are becoming an increasingly like bigger point of debate. That shit ain't safe, right? I mean, like the safest thing you can get to make sure that people aren't trying to interfere or trying to like fuck that shit up is pen and paper, right, or pencil and paper. And yet it seems like increasingly some states want to go full electronic, which I just think is like a huge like gap in safety, No,
you're right. The Iowa caucuses were talking about doing some sort of online caucusing for people to get more people out there, and they had to abandon that plan because of security. They were concerned.
Wow, this might be something that the left and the right could actually agree on, because I'm totally in favor of paper ballots only.
Yeah, me too.
I think we're headed that direction, honestly. It's kind of weird and old school.
Well, I don't know what the advantage is of the new stuff, other than I guess maybe it's cheaper. I don't know, but I mean, otherwise, just this constant issue of security.
Doesn't seem like it would be cheaper either, though, right? Because of like new implementations, like you have to bring it all up to standard anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so... I was thinking like maybe the cost of a machine is less than constantly printing paper ballots, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
I'd love to see the numbers on that, because I imagine
Yeah.
even if there's an advantage, it's probably
you're
too
probably
close.
right.
It's probably just like about ease and,
Yeah.
like access. But I feel like
Yeah.
most issues of access aren't whether or not you have an electronic voting booth. It's not
Yeah.
going to take you especially long. If anything, it would take you longer with an electronic system, because those
Yeah.
they can have issues, whereas pen
Yeah.
and paper, it's always going to
Yeah.
be the same. So
Yeah, that's about the only other advantage I could see, though. Oh, and that maybe the better for the environment.
that's true.
Yeah, all that paper that you print those
What
ballots
about
with.
accessibility and convenience? Those are some benefits of.
Yeah, but the paper ballots are pretty accessible, though, right?
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
that's not really an issue of an accessibility. Like it might be slightly more, but even then, where don't you have paper, right?
Yeah.
Did any of you guys vote with electronic machines when you voted in 2018 or 2016?
I think when I voted in because I was a Florida resident for 3 years, and I voted in Florida, I think in 2014 or no, 2012. I think in 2012 there was actual electronic voting machines, but every time in Montana, it's always been paper ballot.
Yeah, every ballot I've ever filled out has been a paper ballot, but then you slip it into an electronic machine afterward.
Right. Same
Oh,
here.
maybe that's
Same
what it
here.
was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you do that in Montana, Lecture Fan?
No, actually, and so it was actually pretty interesting. In 2018, I was like volunteering for the Republican Party to like help watch the vote counting process, and so they have vote counting machines that count the votes and that they like put paper ballots into, but it's not something that the voter ever gets to interact with. It's something that's done behind the scenes after the voting is closed, after the day is over. In the courthouse, doors are locked, and they're counting the ballots, and they use machines to count paper ballots. But that's, I think, completely different than any of these electronic voting machines. Okay. I was gonna say on the actual Ring thing, I don't have one of these Ring cameras, and I don't have one of these Alexas either. And I think I probably feel kind of like TreeofLogic does on some of that stuff. But I kind of have a hard time really defending sort of like, I really care about my privacy, because I do vlogs on Twitch of my life, and I'm a Twitch streamer. And so I'm obviously not a private person. Much of my life is all public and online. But at the same time, I'm still way turned off by like the Ring thing and Alexas. And I think that there's a big concern with the hacking. There's a big concern with those companies recording you and using for your private data. But my bigger concern, I think, is kind of twofold. One is that these companies have data that the government wants, and that the government can get either through subpoena or, more importantly, just voluntarily. Like a lot of these companies, if law enforcement comes to these companies, and there's stories of this out there with like Alexa, like people have been convicted of crimes by law enforcement getting recordings from these types of devices. And I think it's terrible when these
Amazon on
companies
several
cooperate.
occasions have actually had breach of security where they actually have had conversations that Alexa had recorded from one family and sent it to somebody else totally different.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I know a fellow who's a prosecutor, and he, I don't want to say they love social media, but it's a whole new treasure trove of evidence, right? And for the most part, those companies aren't going to fight any requests to get that information. So,
Oh no, they don't hold any responsibility for it.
Yeah, I mean, understandably enough, Apple, I think, occasionally pushes back on government requests because privacy is a big part of their brand. But of course, they only do that here. They don't do that in China, of course. So,
There was that famous case where they wouldn't unlock the phone for the government. They refused to unlock the phone.
But for the most part, I think that's an exception in this country. And so yeah, every new service you sign up for is, another trail of evidence.
I think a lot of people misunderstand when I talk about this topic. They're like, well, do you do like illegal stuff when the camera isn't on? And it's like, of course I don't. But, okay, here's a very simple example. I'm working on eco-friendly, non-toxic nail polish. I'm trying to start up a company. And when I make my whole spiel or whatever, there's always a part where I have to talk about how a lot of, to make a nail polish, big corporations need a bunch of patents because you can technically make a chemical bomb with the ingredients you do to make most nail polish. Now, imagine taking that out of context. Just, making a bomb with ingredients I have to use in nail polish when I'm talking. Like, I could easily see a future where people like either try to paint me as a terroristic threat, or if the government doesn't like what I'm saying, like make a whole case against me. So to me, that's a real concern here. That it doesn't matter if you're not doing illegal stuff. It'll be very easy to take words you say out of context, or tweak things a little bit to make it seem like you're a complete and utter psycho.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a huge part of our. No, I mean, I think that's a very reasonable way to think about it. I mean, privacy is not just something that people who are engaged in nefarious behavior should be worried about. I mean, everybody should be worried about it, because what seems purely innocent and fine to you can be maybe misconstrued by somebody else.
I always say people that say, "Oh, I don't care about Fourth Amendment rights or searches and seizures, and I don't care about government surveillance because I've got nothing to hide." To me, that's the same thing as saying, I don't care if the government violates my freedom of speech because I don't have anything to say.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
But I hear you.
I feel like a boomer because I just feel weird about having Alexa in my house and the cameras. I don't know. I'm not ready to go there.
Same. It seems like a step too far, right? If you're actively, like LCTRfan was talking about, now his life is very public, and he volunteers those things. You're fully aware of what that's really. You're fully aware that is going to be for everyone. Whereas there's, I think, a misled expectation of some degrees of privacy with the information that you share with your Alexa, with your cameras, right? That initially maybe was present for people with social media. People thought that there maybe was a little more privacy than there actually was. Yeah. So I think that like people are getting used to that. People are now like in the learning curve of the microphones and cameras that are now in their homes, and it's just kind of unsettling. So you're seeing the pushback from it now become a little more popular.
Yeah, somebody made the comment that like, yeah, we can say that we don't want Alexas in our house or Rings and stuff, and I agree. I don't want either of those anyway. But we've got our phones and we've got our webcams here, so it's almost like we've already kind of lost the battle.
You guys don't cover your webcam up, because when my camera is not in use, this is the only webcam I have. I put an actual cloth over it. When even if my computers are off, I cover my webcam.
I cover my webcam. I love having this girl next to me listening to everything I say. This robot, I won't say her name because she'll fire up. But like, I love the convenience of these things, and I understand. I'm not ignorant to the potential risk. I just think the good outweighs the bad. But again, that's for everybody to decide. Can I do an age? It feels like kind of a boomer conversation. I'm 33. Can we do an age check?
No.
Real quick, or is that, of course not.
How would you?
I feel like I think of. I don't want to assume Mage. Maybe this is a boomer take. But I love my Alexa, and damn it, I said it. She's listening. I'm gonna unplug her so you can tell her and she won't listen.
I just don't know why people have cameras in their house, like in their living room, staring at them. Like, I get a camera out at the front door, but like, why in your living room? I don't understand that.
Because I'm a former police officer and I have people who are trying to kill me, and because I live at home alone, I have cameras in here just in case something happens to me, and therefore there are actual footage in here to see what happened to me. I have cameras outside my home. I have cameras inside my home. They are hardwired. They are actually go on a storage base, and I also have an arsenal in my house. So that's the reason why I have cameras. I can't tell why everybody else have cameras. I have cameras to protect me, and if anything happens to me, my friends will know exactly who to come after.
Fair enough.
I think that's a good idea. I remember when I was I worked for an internet technology company like right out of high school, and I remember back in the day then, it was like the cutting edge technology to be able to set up a camera in your house and have it set up and have it accessible from the internet. And I think that's cool. Like, I would have a Ring type system if I could develop it myself. And maybe that's even less secure than having a company do it. But I think security cameras and having that stuff set up, I think that's great if you do it yourself and you're not like relying on some other company.
That's actually like a really good idea. So like all the like big professional technology organizations like IEEE, one of the things they actually recommend for everyone for security is to build your own firewall, which is an extra step but then you don't have the vulnerabilities that come with like using a publicly provided system.
Well, I feel like it would be nice if it were a little easier maybe to give up certain kinds of privacy, like just because I have a camera in my room here doesn't mean I want the world to know what kind of, furry paraphernalia I'm ordering off of Etsy, So I mean, I like to keep it segmented. And I feel like one of the things that technology like Alexa, for example, that's so integrated into everything makes it difficult to do. It's like, it feels like it would be difficult to segment any kind of, what do you want to keep private? What do you want to share with the world?
I just think it's insane that right now, as it stands, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm pretty sure I'm not, these companies can literally sell your data to whoever, right? Like, to me, that's just utter insanity. That's the personal pieces of like my life. And you can be like, oh, well, technically you consent by using the internet or using like the product. But at the same time, at least when it comes to the internet, maybe we can make a separate cases like for Alexas and stuff. Like, that's kind of a low-key necessity nowadays. If you want to be able to like hold a job, if you want to be able to just like communicate or live like a life at the same quality and standard as other people, that's something you have to use. So being like, oh no, that's something you consent to, when it's really like more like kind of not a gun at your head exactly, but this really implied enforced necessity. To me, that's insanity.
Yeah, what's interesting is that how many people actually love the fact that these companies know all this stuff about it. And so, like, what I think is crazy is that we're moving towards this situation where we might go on to Amazon.com, not like because we want to buy something and because we're searching for something, because we want Amazon to tell us what we really want. And so, like Google and Amazon and these Facebook companies, they know more about us than we almost know about ourselves. And so you'll go on and you'll see like advertisements for products that they're targeting you with, and you're like, damn, I didn't know I wanted that. That's a great idea. Buy it, buy it, buy it. And so, I mean, some people like that. And I just think that's crazy though, like, because it sort of destroys our individuality kind of a little bit, and it reduces our sort of individualism and independence, because we're looking for what's that 4.9 star product that has a bunch of reviews that's selling hot, we want to buy that too. And it's like we're losing our ability to even think for ourselves, even when it comes to the most basic things like what do we want.
There's been a lot of published articles regarding what to do with private data. That's one of the things I do like about Andrew Yang, is this actually is like a talking point for him that he just doesn't talk about on like the debate stage as much. But there's actually a lot of theorizing that in the future, in about 20 or so years, we're going to get some sort of compensation for our private data because regulation is going to go in that direction. So it's more likely to give you like a free service, or if you allow us to use your data, we'll give you Facebook Plus with all these additional features. That way, they're still not paying us anything because, of course, they don't want to pay us anything. But there's some incentivization to let us do this legally.
I don't mind them using my data. Compensation would be cool. Go ahead, guy.
Oh, I was going to say, this is a concern for me when looking at China, because China is a surveillance state, and they can do whatever they want. They don't got to ask their citizens, and they're just mining data there, right? And like Andrew Yang says, data is the oil of the future. And we're sitting here fighting our government from doing facial recognition to us. And, they're advancing their AI quickly, and they're predicted to pass us in 5 years on this stuff. And it is a bit of a concern that we're trying to share less and less, and China is getting more and more. I don't know, does that concern anybody else out there?
I don't know. I think using China as like a bastion of like, I guess, a comparison to me is something that I don't like doing, because they're using this data for really terrible reasons, right? They're using it to find people who have their low social credit scores.
There you go, the social credit score. Do you really want that here?
Well, as some folks have tried to persuade me, well, you capitalist bootlicker, we've already got a credit score system in the United States. You can't buy a house without a good credit score. It's basically the same thing. But of
No,
course,
it's
I mean,
not.
it is very different. Like the Chinese system is so far down the line in terms of controlling your actual behavior. Like our credit system basically makes it more expensive to engage in some economic activity than it would otherwise be. The Chinese system will prevent you from getting on flights, prevent you from boarding trains,
Yep.
prevent you from traveling, I believe, different regions internally in China, which already has an internal passport system. So yeah, it's pretty spooky. It's very spooky.
Yeah, probably land you to jail, or like if you happen to be Muslim, it'll be an easier way to like recognize people who have those similar features.
Yeah.
Like, by the way, whoever doesn't know, genocide's happening in like China right now, and nobody wants to do anything about it. It kind of freaks me out. It's like really worrying stuff.
Yeah, I think that China is clearly like the biggest danger to human rights and human freedom that the world knows right now, and I think it's absolutely something to be concerned about. And it is kind of funny that we're sitting here, talking about making sure the U.S. government and our state governments don't do mass surveillance, even though they're still doing it and all this other stuff. And then meanwhile, China's doing it, but not only within China, but China's actually exporting their surveillance technology to countries worldwide and training them up on how to use it and stuff like that. And I guarantee China has files on all of us, and they've got they're surveilling everybody. And I think the China and the great battle of the 21st century is obviously American style constitutional republic and freedom and individual rights versus Chinese style authoritarianism, communism, etc. And that's why I think Trump is spot on the money with going after China. And frankly, probably we even need to be tougher on China. I mean, I always ask it this way. Like, let's say you guys ran a business and you knew that there was somebody in your town that you knew was like a murderer and a thief and a killer and it just does all these terrible things. And that person came in and says, "Hey, dude, I want to do a business deal with you. Do you want to do a business deal?" Would we do a business deal with that person? Of course not. So why are we doing it with China?
Hold on a minute. Now, are they murderers like they're on the run, like they should be arrested? Or are they like people who have served their sentence, in which case, yeah, I'm happy to do a business deal with them, depending on the circumstances.
Personification.
What are we talking
of
about?
China.
There are people
China's
that have done murders that have not been caught.
Like, I mean, am I saying look, I mean, if somebody has served their sentence and for some reason they're out, but yeah, if they're out, then yeah, I guess I'd want to call the police on them. I feel like that's a different situation than saying like individuals should be free to make trading arrangements with other individuals who happen to be from China.
I mean, no, but we're talking about like doing business with China as a whole, right? We're talking about I guess like trade deals in general, or as I would take it a step further, allowing American companies to go in there and have deals with them as well, right? I think that's like kind of messed up in a sense. You have various corporations who claim to be like American companies or hold American values, like indirectly supporting genocide or indirectly supporting, the mass surveillance and incarceration of Chinese citizens under the name of an extra dollar. And I think that's unacceptable. I think it's like extremely messed up that these corporations are so willing to like give up these, I guess, like human rights under the possibility of getting that extra dollar. And I think as the United States and as like citizens of the US, we should try to like push these companies via legislation or public pressure or whatever it may be to tell them to cut that shit out. Like, don't freaking, I guess, like in a sense, like authenticize a government that's continuously killing innocent people and doing all this terrible shit to them.
So is your position then, Pxie and LCTRfan, that we should not trade with China at all, ideally? I mean, that would do the most harm to them, I guess you're saying, right? Like, was that your position, just don't trade with them?
No, I think it's an interesting question to ask. So like if you wouldn't in your own personal life do business with somebody that you know is a horrible criminal and you wouldn't choose to do a business deal with them, then why are we okay with doing deals with China? I'm asking the question. I'm not proposing that we go against them. Well, I am saying though that the entire premise and reasoning behind opening up to China, starting with Richard Nixon, the entire premise was that let's open up to them economically. Let's do trading with China. Once they liberalize economically, that will automatically lead to political liberalization. And once the Chinese people, get economically better off, then they're going to demand political liberalization. And I think that entire theory has failed. China has done nothing to get better on human rights or anything like that. And so and China is clearly, I think, our biggest enemy worldwide. And we're in a global ideological struggle akin to the Cold War between Chinese-style authoritarianism and communism versus American-style capitalism and constitutionalism. And that's I'm not saying let's just cut it off, but I'm saying what Trump is doing is correct, and we need to do more of that. That's what I'm saying.
Now, when you say that part about the Cold War, that the oncoming Cold War, like politically with China, yeah, I'm on board with that. China is the big rival for the 21st century. But what I'm not on board with is the notion that any trade arrangement really, I maybe you're not saying this. Maybe, I mean, it sounds like you're leaving a little room here because it's a complex issue here. So I don't mean to misstate you. But what it sounds like you're saying is any trade arrangement between an American and a Chinese interest is basically helping the Chinese, and I guess doing more to that is a greater problem than whatever benefit comes from that trade arrangement, whether it be amelioration of poverty in China, which of course has been one of the great success stories of human development in the late 20th, early 21st century, right? Has been the crash of numbers of people living in grinding poverty in China, right? A huge success story for capitalism. That's one. And then two, saying that I guess the extent that this trade arrangement benefits America is also pretty well irrelevant, right? Because if we're helping somebody in China, we are therefore inevitably helping the Chinese government, which engages in nefarious activities. I mean, that's basically what you're saying, right?
I mean, I wouldn't. No, not really. Not really. It's not. Okay. I don't think it's not that black and white. I'm saying we should be cognizant of this. I'm concerned about our history of trading with China and how it was completely one-sided. And that's why my only statement so far is that what Trump is doing. I asked the question about should we really be doing business deals with horrible genocidal maniacs?
Yeah.
Simply to make the point that Trump is on the right path.
Yeah. So that's the thing. I don't think it's fair to say that somebody in China, for example, who we're doing a business deal with, maybe some Chinese company, maybe there's some different case for a state-owned Chinese company, which is basically an arm of the government there. But when you're talking about an independent business, right, or when you're talking about a Chinese person trying to sell a product in the United States, I don't think it's fair to say that we as individuals should feel morally compelled to punish them because of the activities of their government by restraining trade with them.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
The whole idea of like a Chinese, like truly like private company, as I know, like is not even like kind of true, right?
It's not. Yeah.
Yeah. As far as I know, like China's probably like the best example, like crony capitalism we have right now. Like chances are, if you own a business in China, unless if it's like some small like restaurant or some shit, you're probably part of the Chinese Communist Party, or you have like really strong relations with them, and if you step out of line, you best believe your company is going to be taken away, right? It's not like in America where you have like liberals and Democrats and like Republicans who own businesses. It's like you're with the party, and if you're not with the party and your business is like growing or whatever, then we'll give it to someone in the party. So I think like all Chinese like business, at least ones that are big enough to like perhaps like start working with the United States, are pretty much government controlled, right, to some certain level.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's the fact that the Chinese government is overbearing, and it absolutely is. It's oppressive. I don't know that that's fair to say, therefore, that every Chinese citizen basically has no individual autonomy, no interest in like trying to improve their own lives through engaging in business.
She didn't say person. She said businesses. The big businesses.
I mean, corporations are people, my friend, of course. But
no, but we're saying.
But I get what you're saying. I just feel like to say that because there's overwhelming government pressure there, like therefore you're helping the government in every exchange. I mean, that's like if you oppose American imperialism, as some might call it, if you oppose America's actions overseas. I'm not calling it imperialism, but if you're against those kinds of actions, you might. If you're opposed to that kind of thing, should you then stop doing business with the United States because some share of your tax money is inevitably going to be going to funding drones in faraway lands?
Well, here's. Okay, so here would be like my counter argument, right? The whole thing, even though I do agree that America has a long history with imperialism, I don't think America is like completely far gone. Okay, like I think that the fact that we're a democracy up to a certain extent means that we can like vote people in and out who believe in said policies, right? So it's not like, oh, it's always going to go 100% to imperialism if you have the right people in power, if you have the right people like voting or the right like legislation passed.
Yeah.
You don't have any of those like, you know, I guess like chances of probability or randomness when it comes to China, right? Like that doesn't like really exist there.
Well, there's one thing I would say that is a little different, and I'll it sounds like you were going to respond, Mike TreeofLogic. One thing that is different, and somebody in the chat mentioned this: China could not have succeeded economically the way it has if the government had managed its economy. They aren't like the Soviet model where the government directly manages everything, and that is the key to why they have succeeded economically. Whereas their Soviet allies, collapsed in utter disgrace. So the Chinese, I mean, they do have the Chinese state is like overarching, but is not directly involved in every economic enterprise the same way that, say, the Soviet state was. I mean, because their system of free market, or not free markets, but their system of capitalism would not work at all if they were, so.
Okay, I feel like that point is up for debate, but your larger point, Bastiat, about how you're trying to make everything, you're either all in or you're all out. It's black and white. It's black and white. I don't think that's the way to look at it. That's not what we're saying. In fact, though, I do think we have, and this comes as a traveler as well. I mean, when I went to Burma in like 2006, I remember being taught by the professors who I was studying with that when you go to Burma, you have to be very, very careful how you spend your money in Burma and where you exchange your money, because you could be assisting and helping the military junta by doing that. And so I think as a world traveler, you have to be cognizant of where your money is going and who it's supporting. And I think as business people, you ought to be as well. And so nobody's saying like completely cut off trade with China or every single person and nobody can ever do business in China. It's much more nuanced than that. And it's simply a recognition that China is an evil empire, and they are bringing back the old Chinese imperialist mantra where they think everything is under China and China is the only sovereign country on earth. And we have to recognize some of that. And again, the main point is to justify what Trump is doing. And maybe China, the Chinese government doesn't control or have ownership in every single Chinese enterprise. But again, China is one of the most corrupt countries on earth, and businesses only get licenses if they are corruptly getting them to do business. And whether that's at the local level, the ports of entry, et cetera, it's all corrupt. And we have to be cognizant of that. And again, I'm not saying cut off all trade with China, but I don't know if you're proposing, Bastiat, hey, give up on trying to do better trade deals with China. Let's go back to the way it was between 1970 and 2016 when China was totally screwing us over and getting horrible trade deals, and they're running a horrible human rights abuse operation on the backs of business deals by Americans.
But I'll tell you right now.
Wait, can
sorry,
I say
Pxie.
something
Yeah,
very quickly? Sorry. I disagree with LCTRfan. Ideally we wouldn't be doing trade with China right now. Like we are, because our like stuff is hella cheap, specifically because they've manipulated the currency to be lower than what it's supposed to be for years, right? And because we have so much now American businesses that kind of rely on that. But yeah, in an ideal world, we wouldn't be trading with China. We wouldn't be allowing them to get away with this shit until they get their stuff together, right? So yeah, no, absolutely. Ideally, if the world worked the way I wanted it to work, we would not be doing business with China as long as they're doing human rights abuses like this.
So I guess I would chime in, and I'm not in the middle of this debate, but I would chime in is like, what is if we universally agree that atrocities are happening there and we need a solution, and perhaps ending trade altogether is a bad idea. What is a good idea? Bastiat, Pxie, or LCTRfan? It's solution then, because I'm genuinely asking.
No, and I've said I said I support Trump's trade policy and trade negotiations and foreign policy with respect to China. I don't think Bastiat has said what his proposal is.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you right now, I don't support the. Oh, I'm sorry. Please go
I'm
on.
trying to get in here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's fine. Okay, so part of the problem is that we have to trade with China, right? Like, U.S. is the number one consumer of electronics goods. Important part of any like electronics good is silicone, right? Silicone's necessary. Everything. Silicone minerals are almost not exclusively found in China, but pretty darn close, right?
So,
He-
yeah, you cut out for a second, Leon.
Okay, yeah, consumer electronics goods, which you're saying like cheap stuff from China, it's cheaper because silicone is found almost exclusively in China, right? The U.S. produces less than 6% of the world's silicone. China, or refined silicone, China produces 2/3 of it. We don't have a choice, and part of the reason we've even like lost manufacturing to China is because it's much easier to get it, to refine it and build stuff there and then ship it to the U.S. Right? It would be much more expensive to actually bring the minerals here and then have them refined and everything. We almost don't have a choice but to like trade with China, despite all the bad things China's obviously done.
For what it's worth, I mean, I think that's an example. I guess I disagree with that premise that we have to trade with China. Like, as much as I want to trade with China, I think I'm pretty vocal on that. We probably could, if we really wanted to seal ourselves off, like focus on domestic supplies of these goods, trying to develop sources elsewhere. Like, for example, one example that's analogous. I'm not an expert on silicone, so you may be right on that. I may not be up to snuff on that, but something that seems analogous is rare earths, which China dominates the rare earth minerals sector. Like, these are minerals that are important apparently for all kinds of fancy electronic gadgets like your phone, right? And the Chinese decided to play hardball with their control over the majority of the world's supply of rare earths. And what happened? An American interest recently opened up a rare earth mine that had been shuttered for several years. These rare earths are going to cost more to mine and refine than they would in China, but if China reduces the supply, other countries will take its place. So I don't know that China has. I mean, rare earths are more expensive to get from elsewhere. If we stop trading with China, everything would be more expensive. A lot of things would probably be priced out of our reach. But I mean, I guess we could do it. I think the real question is.
So just go back to pre-Trump American foreign policy.
Let's go to that. All right. So as far as the president's trade deal, you can say a lot about the president's trade deal, but none of what he is doing seems to be aimed whatsoever at inhibiting China's growth as an oppressive power. It seems to be designed as a kind of protectionist program to bring some industry back to the United States, to force the Chinese to import more American agricultural goods. And whatever you might say about the domestic economic benefit of that, as far as I'm concerned, it's zero. I don't know how that has anything to do with spreading freedom in China, holding China to account for any of the stuff you talked about with respect to them being our rival in the world. I mean, it sounds like he's trying to get better trade terms, but I mean, I don't know what that has to do with holding China to account for being an oppressive country. So what am I missing there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just because I know Pxie's stance, and Lecture is saying trust Trump, Pxie saying shut off trade with China, Leon saying maybe we can't. Bastiat, what do you do?
What am I saying? All right,
no, I'm just asking. Yeah. What would you do? Like, if I want to be an activist, go ahead, sorry. Or on a board, just
all the answers with China are political, as far as I can see, and economic in the sense of trying to help other countries overseas who maybe don't want to deal with the Chinese when it comes to like their Belt and Road Initiative. So right now, the Chinese are, and when I say the Chinese, I mean exclusively the Chinese government. The Chinese government has this Belt and Road Initiative where they're basically putting loans they're making large infrastructure loans available to countries all over the world, and thereby spreading their influence all around Central Asia and Africa and all around the world. And in some cases, these loans come with terms that are pretty perilous for the countries that take them. Like Sri Lanka took out one of these Belt and Road loans, couldn't pay it back, and ended up surrendering one of their ports to the Chinese Navy as a result. And I think one thing the United States should do is announce some kind of global, basically global cash giveaway of its own to try and get other countries on its side instead of, basically letting them fall into the Chinese camp. So that'd be one thing I would do. But I would fund that by trading as freely and openly as possible with the whole world, including China. Because ultimately, when it comes to the issue of trying to stop China from engaging in the oppressive activities it's engaging in, I don't think I don't think trade sanctions are going to do that at all. And I think that, frankly, China's own history shows that. China's brutality has gone on since 1949, since the advent of the communist regime. China used to be one of the poorest countries in the world. That's when Mao instituted the Great Leap Forward that killed tens of millions of people, the executions that came with the Cultural Revolution in the 60s and 70s. I mean, that brutality happened when China was a much poorer country. So I don't think the fact that China is now freshly richer, still not a rich country, but it's a richer country than it was, I don't think that is making China more oppressive. I think that's the Communist Party is what it makes China oppressive, not the fact that it now has more money to throw around. I think that to the extent China has more money, it's alleviated poverty. And you can maybe argue that it's helped them build up their military somewhat, but even in the past, China's had a strong, large military backbone.
Yeah, but having the resources to affect more change, especially with data, right? Like with the rise of AI, with the development that will apparently surpass us in 5 years, that will allow potentially, right? Like, and that's the worry. It's the potential, like reality that could be, right? A lot of coulds, a lot of potentials, but that could be like mass human rights abuse by this country that is want to abuse human rights. So I mean, I think that's the issue that people take. I think that's why people are afraid. That's why Elon Musk is, quaking in his boots on Twitter about AI and regulation, because there does stand to be like a real reason to be afraid of potential human rights abuses through that kind of technology that extends not only to China then, but to all of us.
Yeah,
well,
no,
I guess China stands out
also,
because it's so big and powerful, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Pxie. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm sorry. I'm like cutting everybody off. Sorry, but so here's the deal, right? So you're right that there's been human rights abuses before China became, I guess, like economically wealthy. But now with economic power, you have the ability to kind of export or exploit or just spread around your imperialism like ideals, right? We know China's an imperialist nation. There's no reason to believe that they're not going to want to spread their values onto other nations, right? And these values are things that we can say like no human should really ever be subjected to.
Oh, yeah, I gotcha. I mean, it's just that the Soviet Union tried to do that in the Cold War, right? And our trade with the Soviet Union was virtually zero until, of course, Soviet agriculture collapsed and they started importing grain from the United States. And the ultimate show of what a failure their system was. But, trade with the Soviet Union was almost zilch for most of the Cold War. It was very low. I think no more than like 1 to 5% of the Soviet economy was from trade with the United States and vice versa. And yet they still engaged in that kind of global campaign. I think the United States needs to engage in kind of global counter campaign, but I don't think trade with China has any bearing on China's ability really to project power. Again, the much poorer Soviet Union was able and willing to do that. And frankly, to the extent China is now trying to do it with cash instead of like with force of arms like the Soviets did, I mean, that's an improvement in a sense.
The thing is, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as I know, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, it has changed in recent years now that China has like a bigger middle class. But for a very long time, like China's economy has kind of like half relied on the United States economy, right? Like the United States is the biggest like consumer of goods. China mass produces goods to send to the United States. It's a very like I guess like symbiotic relationship. And although things are kind of changing now since China's having like a growing middle class, which is why you have like a lot of people trying to invest there now because they can get a piece of the pie now. I would still argue that reliance is still kind of there. And if there's going to be any point in time where we kind of seize that or seize like the, I guess, economic control or power we have in China right now, it would be like literally right now before it's too late.
So, the thing that I guess the other thing that gets me about this is that, and LCTRfan, maybe you can explain like more about this tailored approach, because I guess I'm not sure what the tailored approach is. But what gets me is it doesn't seem like, because I know you're accusing me of being all or nothing. I guess I don't understand like what the alternative to that is in this situation.
Okay, well, my main problem with what you said is that your solution was do a global spending campaign to try to get people to support America's ideals, and then do free trade with China. The problem with that is we've never had free trade with China, and you can't just magically wave a wand and get free trade with China. It's not free trade when China gets access to our markets, we don't get access to their markets. It's not free trade when they manipulate their currency, but we don't manipulate our currency. And so you can't just all of a sudden have free trade and that be a solution. You could go back to what we had before Trump, which is these one-sided deals where they get access to our markets, we don't get access to their markets. But you can't just wave a magic wand and get free trade. But more importantly, like you're trying to say that, oh well, Trump doing these limited trade deals or trying to negotiate with trade deals has no impact on the spread of American freedom versus Chinese authoritarianism. And I would submit to you that it absolutely does, and that's somewhat short-sighted of you to suggest that, because what goes on worldwide is that countries and people look at how countries are doing under their systems, and then they want to adopt one that's going great. So if what we're going to do with you, which is not go with Trump's policy, but presumably go with something before Trump, if it's maybe we're trying to get to free trade, but we can't get there, what's going to happen is Chinese and Chinese-like systems are going to do exactly what Chinese has done, which is stealing our intellectual property, engaging in mercantilism type policies, and then having access to American markets. And so that the problem is now we have a much weaker argument to say that countries should adopt freedom as opposed to authoritarianism, because why wouldn't you go to authoritarianism if you can do trade deals with Bastiat and do completely one-sided trade deals, and they get to steal all of our intellectual property?
Well, no, that depends on what you mean by the Chinese system. For example, if you're talking about, say, the system of the People's Republic of China, I think the results of that are far less appealing in terms of the economic success they've seen than the results of the other Chinese system, which was what went down in Hong Kong. Right? Hong Kong, at least until very recently, was the freest economy in the world. They had unilateral free trade with the rest of the world, which is to say, even countries that had tariffs on Hong Kong's goods, nevertheless were able to trade freely in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong thrived and prospered like no part of the world probably before or really since. I know Hong Kong ran into some tough times since the Chinese annexed it and started mucking things up. But certainly until 1997, and even really until relatively recently, freest economy in the world, no import restrictions or tariffs on foreign imports. They thrived and prospered, and in a very, in a relatively small and inhospitable rocky island outcropping. All right. So the idea that free trade doesn't work even when it's unilateral is simply wrong. I mean, Hong Kong itself, the Hong Kongers striving for freedom right now, are a living example of the power of even unilateral free trade. And while you're right that it would be better if it worked both ways, even if the rest of the world wants to maintain their import barriers, if the United States drops its own import barriers and allows complete free trade, it will thrive and prosper further and further. So the idea that we need the Chinese to agree to good terms for the import of our products, ultimately, if the Chinese government want to tax their people extra, make them pay more for foreign goods, that's their problem. Ultimately, that hurts the people of China. That doesn't hurt us. We get the cheap goods either way. So I think you're misstating the benefits of free trade. Even if it's one-sided, we still benefit. And the notion that the Chinese have a mercantilist system, again, I wouldn't doubt that I wouldn't disagree that to some degree they do, but that's their problem, right? It's not. It keeps us from being as rich as we otherwise would be if they allowed free trade into their country, but we are still richer for allowing free trade in our country. As a result,
so
allowing free import of Chinese goods.
And so you're proposing that the United States, let's just get rid of all of our free trade agreements with all these countries and just throw America's borders wide open. No. Anybody that wants to do it, come on in. It's
not
free trade.
Well,
if we can anything in return.
Yeah, ideally we could get something in return, but we would be better off with complete free trade, as Hong Kong had, even if that meant other countries wanted to maintain their barriers. Because at the end of the day, if other countries want to subsidize They're poorly performing companies and uncompetitive goods. That's for their people to pay for. That only benefits American consumers with cheap goods, and then American consumers can go on to produce other things instead of the goods that I guess foreign countries are subsidizing.
So
your reading of trade, I think, is very unfair.
Why not get rid of most favored nation status in all of our trade laws and trade regulations, and get rid of the WTO and get rid of all of these trade laws and just throw open the borders?
Given the success that the United States has previously had prior to the Trump administration, organizing free trade agreements with different countries in the world, maybe you can argue that some limits are better overall for the sake of getting access to the whole market. But when it comes to the notion of throwing up limits for the sake of hurting another country, all you're doing is hurting American consumers. To really, you're not going to create political change through that metric. You're only hurting Americans in the process. And Pxie, I know you've been I'm trying to get in here.
Dying to get in. Okay, so here's the deal, right? I don't think that was a fair comparison at all, right? Hong Kong itself is not an imperialist nation, right? Like there is economy. I don't think this is conspiracy theory shit. I think this is China 101 shit, or even Russia 101 shit. The richer they get, or the more powerful they get, the more they want to fuck over America, right? I think it's very different to have like a small little area who's like free trade for all, like let's see who can get in here to do business, rather than a very like powerful imperialist nation that purposely wants to fuck over other nations so they can get more power, right? Yes, you could be like, oh, theoretically, if we have free trade, it'll be better for us in the long run. But as long as you're somehow contributing to like the economic successes of these like other really like authoritarian imperialist nations, there is no doubt in my mind that they're going to use that money they gain to find a way to fuck you over, right? So I don't think that's really a fair comparison.
So let me ask you this, and LCTRfan, I'm curious what you think about this too. So I think we could at least say, irrespective of everything else, that trade with China has helped millions of Chinese, and I would argue millions of Americans, but we don't even need to talk about that, improve their standard of living in ways that were they never even imagined in years past. Hundreds of millions of people in China in particular have been lifted out of poverty under the new economic arrangements we've had with the Chinese since then. And I think the United States has gotten richer too in the process. At least our goods have gotten cheaper. And I think that means we've gotten in a way richer. So do you think that should count for anything when thinking about trade, when thinking about, hey, maybe the Chinese government has some more money to use now, but hey, the Chinese people, hundreds of millions of fellow human beings, are richer and better off than they've ever been before?
I reject that primarily because you don't know what would have happened if we didn't open up and start trading with China. Tiananmen Square might have come out a different way, and China could be living under a republic right now instead of authoritarian communist regime. And so I don't think you can just say, and money, oh, we got more money. That's, they're living in an authoritarian regime where their human rights are violated left and right. And you want to say, oh, well, they got a little bit of extra money. It's like some things are more important than money.
I grant you that, but they lived in authoritarian conditions before and after the trade deal. So,
and had no money prior.
Yeah, they're used to it.
It's like they are living in a better condition when you just look at it like side by side. Okay, they're authoritarianly abused and poor. Now they're less poor, also abused, but less poor, right? They have more access to basic standards of living, right? So,
and the government has more access to quell down rebellions and kind of fuck over the lowest class still, right? Are we going to pretend that, yes, millions of Chinese have technically gotten out of poverty? Let's define poverty, right? Are you talking about people who work in factories like Foxconn, who might technically not be poor, but whose standards of like living and working are so bad that they have to put suicide nets because people constantly throw themselves over the rails because they can't take those conditions anymore? Like,
I mean, to be fair, I don't think suicide nets are a good example of what is necessarily bad in society, because I mean, Cornell has suicide nets like on the bridge near freshman housing because people, it's just like it's accessible, right? Like you place suicide nets and people jump from things.
Yeah, no,
that's more about accessibility and less about the culture, I think.
Yeah, the point I was like trying to make is that yes, these people might have like a little bit more money, but their standard of living is still ridiculous, right? It's still pretty freaking bad. It's not like
I mean, there's a growing middle class in China of at least 100 million people who have a much better living standard than they had. And even the people now who work in factories in these crowded Chinese cities. I mean, again, the only reason they moved to leave rural areas to take these jobs is because they think there's a chance they can improve their standard of living. I mean, the standard of living in people in China is definitely improved. And
Well,
I
in
think
fact-
that it's, I mean, to write that off and just say it's like, it's not a big deal.
But
And
do
you
you
know,
think
one
that's
other
not-
one other thing to consider here: we've been blockading Cuba, a much weaker nation, for 60 years now, and nothing has come of that except the misery and continued entrenchment of the Communist Party in Cuba. So the idea that if we had blockaded China and not traded with them, that a much stronger nation like China would have crumbled, I don't think there's any basis to that claim.
Well, there actually is a significant amount of basis for the proposition that one of the main reasons that a lot of people think that the Chinese people have not rose up like they did in Tiananmen Square is because they are happy with the economic growth in their country. And so lots of people have written articles about this whole idea that China, the entire Chinese system is completely unstable. We could see another Tiananmen Square. We could see another Hong Kong. We could see uprisings of huge proportions and revolutions and horrible. It's very unstable. The only thing that's a lot of people say the only reason we haven't seen more of that and we haven't seen more of Tiananmen Square is because they've been experiencing 10% growth every year. And people are very unlikely to rise up when you're experiencing 10% growth. So in fact, your whole idea, and this is my whole proposition at the very beginning, which is the entire theory of opening up to China in the 70s and doing trade with them is somehow going to be a good thing for human rights and freedom, has been a complete failure. And in fact, I think there's more support for the idea that us opening up to them economically has actually entrenched the authoritarianism and human rights abuses.
Let me ask you this, Tree. I know as a fellow traveler with the flag in the background, what do you think about this trade with China issue?
Taiwan number one, Hong Kong number two, China number nothing.
I mean, Taiwan is kind of an example of a success, of free trade too. I mean,
Oh, you just fucked up the meme, Bastiat. God damn.
I don't know. I don't know the memes. I don't know the memes. Yeah. Sorry about that. I thought you. Yeah.
What I think, I don't care.
I got you. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Look, I'll jump in since I haven't talked in a bit. I care about what's going on in China, and I want to know how to help. Do I just believe in Donald Trump? Do I hope that the government? What can I do on it? Pxie, you seem like quite the activist. What do I do from like an individual perspective?
Okay, so this is
other than voting and influencing change that Bastiat and LCTRfan are talking about.
Can I tell you what might help? Actually, would be to maybe buy more Chinese goods and help the Chinese people improve their standard of living. Because maybe if they can get out of poverty, they can start to think about things like freedom and things like maybe improving their standard of living. Because revolution and change doesn't
and
just.
then
and maybe by the
so
time
that the
maybe
when you are struggling to
have
feed
more
yourself,
money to buy tanks and like other oppressive
when you're struggling to feed yourself,
and
living in grinding poverty, this idea that yes, we'll build a Western-style democracy off of that. I mean, the United States has been one of the freest countries in the world for 400 years because it's also been one of the richest. So
Can we
maybe-
look back at how actually, like, let's say one of the best revolutions, at least like historically speaking, one of the revolutions that inspired America to revolt was the French Revolution, right?
Yeah.
And when did that happen, right? That happened when you had a shit ton of people who were struggling, in poverty, suffering, seeing like this growing like upper rich class being like,
Sure.
Hey, that's kind of fucked up, right?
There's
I
something
think
to that.
historically speaking, you see a lot of these situations when people realize like, holy shit, we have a shit ton of oppression. We're poor while other people are like feeding on the caviar. But Andre, to answer your question,
Please.
this is the hardest thing to do. I haven't even done it yet. Like, try try to not buy stuff that comes from China, right? That's almost impossible. Almost
But Bastiat said the opposite. Will that keep Chinese people in
No,
poverty?
it's-
Who might have believed?
Look, I
No,
think, I think
no,
if
I mean,
if you
feel-
don't want to buy them, I mean, that's up to you. I'm arguing ultimately not to say like it is moral and you must buy things from China. I feel like though what I'm arguing against is the notion that it is immoral as an individual decision to buy things from China.
Well,
I agree. I think it's a little ludicrous, and we've talked about that, and that's where it's sort of circled around. But the idea that like the actual idea, people say, oh, you know, like if everyone did it, but if every U.S. consumer did that, it still really wouldn't matter because you wouldn't actually be able to know like the amount of research that you would need to do into each and every product that you were trying to buy, right? Like to figure out, okay, were the parts made in China?
But, you know, one thing I do want to mention about the French Revolution, I mean, that was a bourgeois revolution in the most advanced country, arguably, in the world at the time. So that was not like a revolution on the backwater of the world. Like, to the extent that China is advancing and developing, I think that arguably improves their revolutionary capacity to the extent that it's there. But
I think the world has changed so much, right? From a time back then where there wasn't like, I guess, like super duper like extra levels of like of oppression, in the sense that China, if they really wanted to, or what they're doing right now, that they can like basically track down your face and fucking kidnap you if they really want to, or where their technology is going to get to that extent. It's very different, like fighting between like, you know, guns versus like tanks, you know, shit like that. So I don't, honestly, to be fair, that wasn't the fair comparison to begin with, because I believe that the ability of an authoritarian state to be authoritarian successfully has become so much more successful because of recent technological advancements.
Well, there's one other thing I want to say about China trade, and that is that if you think we should be doing business or we should be doing something about trade in China, the way that President Trump has gone about it seems to be basically the worst way you could possibly do it. First, he alienated our allies in East Asia by pulling out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would have created a new trading standard that we could have then eventually tried to get the Chinese in on by virtue of having kind of trade hegemony in East Asia, having a good trading bloc that we could have then used as standards to try and then bring the Chinese in on. So that was one. And then he alienated the European Union by putting tariffs on various goods from Europe, our other big allies in the world. And then only then, after alienating all of our other traditional friends and partners in the world, did he then decide to go unilaterally against China. And if he really wanted to go after China, and again, I'm not saying that would have really made much positive difference, as I've been arguing, but if he did want to, he should have made common cause with the Europeans and the East Asians before going after China. So we could have at least done so multilaterally. What he's doing now, as far as I can see, isn't going to have much chance of success because it's us doing it alone, as seems to be the cause of the administration.
I completely agree. Andre, like when you were, I know it's really hard to find things that aren't made in China, but I guess like maybe this is so fucking vague, like, right? Try to support like domestic or local businesses when possible. If you're gonna buy clothes, possibly, and I'm such a hypocrite because I like just buying the clothes, but try to do it from thrift shops, you know, where it's being like recycled, where your extra dollar probably is not going to go, maybe not go back to the Chinese government, right? Who knows if this is going to make any change, but at least it's something to start out with, you know, if you want to be small time activists.
Yeah, it's certainly tough because I hear all the time, vote with your dollars. And Bastiat hasn't like convinced me of the alternative, but there's something to be said, right? I mean, if they're going to be under the foot, I mean, if they're under the foot and they have some resources, are things better? Am I doing anything to slow, right? Like what's happening to the Uyghurs if by protesting? I uninstall Blizzard, right? I don't play Overwatch or Hearthstone.
Me
Like, yeah, but is that, am I really affecting change, or is it, I don't know, is it a platitude? Is it useless? I don't know. I actually don't know.
That's why this is one of the few scenarios that we should put like government pressure on to change, right? Because it's very hard to assign this responsibility to an individual versus like a multi-billion-dollar nation.
No, I don't like. I like the weight to be on my shoulders. I like to try, and even if I don't, you know, and I like to hold myself individually responsible. I know that like climate change is much easier for businesses to slow down, but I'll still use the like shitty paper straw if it helps at all, right?
Well,
That's all.
right now I think that Andre, the issue you just described is another reason why I think government action to restrict trade is such I think a bad idea. Which is to say that these are issues that are not as easy as they might seem at first, particularly if you buy into anything about what I've said with respect to poverty and economic growth. And all the things I've been saying. If you think that's the case, then when the U.S. federal government says, you know what? We're going to restrict your ability to trade freely with people in China. We're going to restrict that. Then that's the federal government putting its thumb on the scale of that moral decision and saying, rather than you making that decision, we're going to push you toward making that decision. We're going to do that for you, which I don't like.
Well, I mean, it's like companies aren't really thinking about morality most of the time, right? Even if it's like changing in modern standards with like corporate social responsibility, most of them still think that their number one priority should be their profit, their shareholders, right? Their stakeholders, instead of like, I guess, like general good or whatever. So in a sense, yeah, no, it is kind of that's where we as a society come together, vote government officials in that hold our ideals to say like, hey, you know what? Like there's a fucking line here. You don't sell out human rights for $1. That's fucked up. We shouldn't do that. So I don't think that's wrong. To like try to say like, hey, if you're an American company, if you're taking advantage of American resources and you're here like saying that you're all here for like the American consumers and stuff, then you better fucking uphold those ideals instead of like indirectly supporting genocide.
Well, I will tell you, while I disagree with the premise you made, I will at least say that I think that it might be nice if some of these companies would stop trying to wear the flag on their sleeves, since it is, of course, as empty as you described it.
True.
Yeah. Do we want to go ahead and move on to another topic?
Yeah, I think so, Leon.
Yeah.
We that was a great conversation about that, but we've got a few interesting ones to get everybody involved. So go ahead, Leon.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring up Greta Thunberg being named Times Person of the Year. Specifically, I want to ask if like she's actually like worthy of it, because most of the votes that people recommended, I think 96% of people recommended the Hong Kong protesters over her. And Time of the Year went with a different direction. But I want to ask TreeofLogic what she thinks of that.
Yeah, I asked someone and they couldn't answer this. I said, why should I give a fuck about this privileged girl?
Oh,
that's a take.
Man,
because the media tells you to, obviously.
Well, I had never heard of her.
They're going through so much stuff over there in Hong Kong. It's like, you mean tell me you passed them up for her? Why? And she just got called out on Twitter for pretending to sit on the floor when she actually had first class seats on the ICE. You know what I'm saying? These photo ops are just ridiculous, and it makes me not like her even more.
Why do you not like her?
Why should I like her?
I mean, she seems like a little girl who wants to affect the world, wants to make change in a positive way. You don't think that's what's happening?
She sees.
No,
it doesn't.
Tell me.
She doesn't give that.
Me.
She does not give me. I don't get that vibe from her. I get that to somebody who lived a very privileged life, who's going to tell me how she thinks, and based upon what her parents have taught her, parents who are washed up actors who have used her to make millions of dollars, are going to sit up here and preach to me? Honey, she haven't even got her period yet, probably. And want to tell me what the fuck to do? I don't fucking know.
Okay. Maybe let's not go in that direction.
Imagine thinking somebody who wasn't born with a blue chip stock that is American citizenship is somehow privileged.
Yeah.
What?
Well, I have to catch you out on something you said there. Okay. Are you implying we shouldn't be teaching climate change to our children?
No, I asked the question, why should I give a fuck about this girl? Sure. This overprivileged girl, why should I give a fuck about her?
Okay. You did make a point there that because she was like taught by her parents.
No. Answer my question. Why should I give a fuck about Greta Thunberg?
Because
I don't need you to love her, but you seem so mad.
Answer my question. Why? See, you can't answer the question without going through. Well, why about this and what about that? And she's a wonderful girl. I'm like, I'm still waiting for the answer to my question.
Okay. Here, Lecture. Did you want something? Sorry.
Oh, I mean, you guys keep going. I got stuff to say, but I can wait. You guys keep going.
Okay.
I just go ahead, Leon. I'll go after you.
I'm gonna rant for a moment.
Oh, I mean, I'm just gonna say in general that she's brought a lot of eyes onto the climate crisis. She got a lot of people out there protesting, and putting her bio aside, you have to look at the result of what she's accomplished as a 16-year-old. That's pretty inspiring for young people.
Why should I care about her and what she has to say?
Because of the things that Important is talking about, right? Because she's bringing attention to an issue that needs attention.
As if I didn't know about the attention. And by the way, I have somebody on Twitch who has taught me more about climate change than she. So my thing is I'm like, she's just noise. She is not teaching me nothing. I mean, she has not taught me anything.
Sure,
the only thing she has taught me to go is, how dare you? How dare you? How dare you? That's the only
good impression.
Tree, was that a shout out to the great touring news?
yes, it is.
I just want to drop his name.
Yes,
here.
it is. Yeah, touring news. I mean,
Is it really?
there it is. Touring news. Believe it or not, I don't listen to a lot of lefties here, but that is one person on the left who has, and this is a huge achievement, who has actually got my ear and made me go, I'm probably need to rethink that position. And he has actually won me over on certain things, you know what I'm saying? And I'm more mindful of that. Greta has repulsed me. You know what I'm saying?
Why should I give a fuck about touring news?
Why are you so negative towards your child?
Here's the thing. I didn't ask you to give a fuck about touring news, did I? I did not ask you to give a fuck about him. I give a fuck about him, okay? That's my buddy. I give a fuck about him. But my thing is that y'all put all over the fucking place. I can't help but see her every fucking way I turn around, and I'm saying to myself, why should I give a fuck about her? But nobody's pushing touring news on you guys. Y'all are pushing Greta on me.
Yeah, no one asked
I keep saying, like, why should I give a fuck about this chick? This little girl, by the way. This little girl.
Okay.
You're so mad. You push touring news on us. Nobody asked you about touring. I love it. No. How did I push them? How did I push them? You said I got a friend on Twitch who taught me way much more.
How the fuck did that have anything to do with you? How did I push that on you? I gave you my example. I gave you my. You are basically deflecting, and I told you I'm giving you my experience. How the fuck is your experience my experience? I gave you my experience. I said me. I said me when I touring. I didn't put you in the equation, boo.
But your experience, correct me if I'm wrong, is a reason why we should give a fuck.
My experience have anything to do with you. So don't lie and say I pushed him on you. I did not. But guess what? Everybody's pushing to Greta on me.
But I mean, you're asking like, and correct me here if I'm wrong at all. You're asking why you should give a fuck, and you like not pushing touring news, but you're talking about touring news, and it's based on your experience with touring news. Other people have an experience here with Greta Thunberg.
But I'm not pushing touring news. As a matter of fact, hold on. Let's be honest. I didn't even mention his name, but Steve mentioned his name. Did he not? I said I got somebody who already. He mentioned his name. By the way, I don't mind. I think people should really check him out. He's a really good YouTuber. He's a really good Twitch streamer. He's really good.
We shouted him.
He's getting way more shout outs than any of us are right now.
Listen, I was selfishly trying to keep him to myself. And I wasn't trying to share him, but Bastiat. Am I pronouncing your name?
No, my name is Bastiat. That's
Bastiat. Bastiat basically, revealed my secret. Okay, so therefore, you can't even sit up here and say that I am pushing him on you or anyone else because I try to keep him to myself.
Yeah, no, I'm pushing him, and I enjoy watching touring news, even though he kind of low key suggested that my job in fossil fuels is killing people. I nevertheless super. I think he's super. Like he is super. He's great. So definitely check him out.
I just don't. I fail to see how it's a problem because I think that. If you have a point and if you have an experience that's personal with touring news, for instance, that we should listen to you, right? Even if it's not directly related to our experience, right? If someone else's opinion on Greta Thunberg, it is still relevant to you.
I didn't say you should listen to me. I never said that.
No, but I'm saying we should, because I'm saying you have a valid.
No, I don't want you to listen to me.
I think your perspective, I think people's opinions and their perspectives are potentially valid until proved otherwise. So I think I would at least remain open to the potential of someone trying to open me up to something that I haven't considered before closing myself off based on whatever I experience with that person.
How about this? You guys have Greta. I get touring by myself. How about that? Can we make that deal? Are we
touring
cool?
too?
Is that
No.
Gucci?
No.
We like
Yeah,
touring.
no, it's not. I want both. I want both.
We're crushing on him too. Come on now.
Yeah, I want both. I want both.
Here's my take on it. So like Elizabeth Warren, for example, talks about the mamas and the babies, and my Aunt B came. That stuff goes over my head. My eyes hit the back of my head when she starts talking about that. But she's not talking to me. She's trying to reach a different audience. And I look at Greta, she's reaching a different audience. So maybe you're not the target audience.
I'm
you know what I'm
not.
saying?
And the other thing I don't get about Greta, and maybe some other folks in here can help me with this, is even if like I don't like her approach, it doesn't resonate with me at all either. But I mean, some of the feelings toward her seem to be so spiteful. I mean,
How dare you?
No, yeah,
How
no.
dare you?
Well, like, look, I mean, again, I don't like that approach, Tree. That the statement
dare
that she
you?
used. But I mean, I don't understand why people are so personally like
How
out to
dare
get her.
you?
You know,
Why are
like
we
she's
mad
just
at her?
she honestly believes the planet is burning, which it is.
Yeah.
And she's trying to share that message with everybody. And I mean, that's not. I just don't understand the frustration, like with her personally. You know, like I saw a bumper sticker in the grocery store parking lot where I buy my groceries the other day. That, was
And it said, "How dare you?"
kind of insult about Greta. Fuck off, Greta. I love my truck or something like that. You know, it's like what is the
Wow.
feelings, what are the feelings about her
climate
that are
How dare
motivating
he?
people to feel so strongly like negative? You know?
Well, it's obvious why. It's because, and it's obvious what's going on
Is it
here.
obvious?
Time Magazine is a left-wing
I didn't like her
publication.
before the Time
if there's-
magazine. Ever since
if
she
there-
got on
if-
stage and said, "How dare you? You took away my childhood and my education. How dare you?" I looked at the damn monitor and said, "Who the fuck does she think she's talking to?"
Tree, I am
not
She's
taking
talking
her-
to the United
I'm taking the
Nations.
performance, Tree.
That's her target
I
audience.
felt like she was being
She's serious.
condescending when she said that. You know what I'm saying? How dare you?
I love your
Well,
performance.
yeah. How dare
Can I
they?
put my 2 cents in?
The
Not
best
do
thing-
anything.
The best thing about her
Academy
was the
Award.
heavy metal that was basically dubbed to her voice, her speech. That was the best thing that ever came out of that speech, where they put heavy
Dude,
metal to
You
it.
need to
basically.
leave that little girl alone. Jesus.
She, I think that I honestly, if I had to pick, I would have picked the Hong Kongers as well. But you know what Time Magazine is, or at least from like what I know about Time, it focuses a lot on like America, right? Greta has become like a very big point of contention here. They picked her because she's controversial, kind of, right? Like, are you gonna really like pick the Hong Kongers and be like, holy shit, like the Hong Kongers shouldn't have been on there or whatever? Like, what's gonna get a conversation starting and clicks rolling, right? If it's anything,
probably
it's
true.
Greta.
Yeah, that's
So that's
I
why
mean,
she was
I
chosen.
don't know if I
think the
agree
Hong
with that.
Kong guy. I think Hong Kongers would have went way more fucking clicks. That's why people picked it. People were interested.
Time
in
magazine
people
just
voting
didn't want to make China
against
mad.
it.
That's all that was. It was all.
There was
it
the
about them
most
China
interest,
butts.
though.
They
There
didn't
was the
want to
most
make
interest.
China mad.
Of course,
could be true.
That's 100%. That's
That was
100% what it
another part
was.
of it.
Does
It's the
Time
same thing that
sell in
Blizzard did.
China?
It's when Blizzard fucking tucked their tail between their fucking
Yep.
knees. Right? It's the same shit with Time. They didn't want to fucking up
Exactly.
that. Right? And they'll be like, oh, it's not a person, right? But they put that in their poll. They allowed that to be a prominent answer because it is a real answer, right? And it should have
Right.
been the answer, right? In my opinion, anyway. And right,
Yeah.
they choose it, whatever. But Greta Thunberg or what? I had never heard of this chick until fucking
How have you
until
not?
Time picked her, and I'm like,
Exactly.
how is this?
Controversy
How
now,
is
you
this so?
see?
How is this so groundbreaking? How is this so relevant in an era where Hong Kong is actively fighting for its freedom? We have someone talking about climate change, which isn't going to change anything. The people like there are the science is out there. People are being educated on it, or they actively refuse. But the issue isn't that people don't have the information. The issue is that people are actively refusing to believe in it.
Well, I
So
don't think
16-year-olds
Greta's
back in the
message was
change
trying to
that.
educate people. I think it was trying to push, like, hey, people in United Nations that can make, like, very important decisions. Maybe this is a global crisis you should actually be doing something about.
Yeah, Greta was talking to governments, at least for a while. I think she still is. Like, she would show up to these European Union meetings and talk specifically to, like, world leaders about this stuff, trying to shame them into action. And, of course, with an issue like this that is so big, I mean, you definitely... Like that's certainly, a credit to her, right? Trying to get in front of decision makers who could maybe do something about this. And Tree is just like, no,
Wow.
don't care.
I would say,
Let
I
it
would
burn.
say, I
Let
would
it
say,
burn.
I
would
feel
say-
like it's just some weird circle jerk for lefty Twitter. I really feel like that's all it is. Like, and that's
Preach,
just.
preach.
Can I just?
I hate being on the side of the right, but like,
I wish you were right. I
Okay,
wish
all
the
I'm
climate
saying,
change
if
was
Hong
not
Kong
real,
was picked,
but it is. You know?
Okay, if Hong Kong was picked, our conversation would have been like, oh yeah, that's totally reasonable, right? Now, since Greta's picked, everybody is like, oh, should she have not? Look at the polls, look at that.
Well,
She
Yeah.
should
people
for this
vote.
exact reason, because I would agree with Hong Kong, but
I would
seeing the reaction
agree
of
with
certain
Hong Kong,
people.
too.
Yeah, look, I'm all Hong Kong, right? But after being on this podcast with people who are so mad at this little girl who really just wants to save the world, and maybe she's 16 and she can't do it. She's not doing a great job. Tree.
I'm just
But,
like, I'm confused. I'm not mad, dog. Tree's mad. Tree's mad, okay? But I'm
not
not.
sitting on the floor of a train in Twitter circle. Jake.
She got caught up faking the funk, man. She
I
had
saw
first
that.
class
I saw
season
that.
and she want to pretend that she's suffering and striving, okay?
She literally crossed the ocean in a sailboat for this climate
A
change.
yacht, a
Yeah.
$15 million yacht. Okay, she was
Well,
on a yacht.
hey, look, I don't know about you, but I've never done anything like that. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Greta was the sail, like the girl who sailed, like that was her.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that was
ago.
her.
Yeah, like she did that because she's trying to raise awareness of how bad for the environment.
Which,
flying
if
is.
I'm not
I
mistaken,
know who
she
this
co-
is. She's a climate person now. Is that?
That's what she's known for.
you didn't know who he was talking about.
How do you know her as the girl on a boat?
Yeah, what?
She's a boat. She's a boat girl. She's a boat chick.
Well,
Dead ass.
Lecture was about to take us on an interesting spin. So, Lecture, do you
y'all
want to
brace
finish that?
yourselves, because I know this
Do
is
it.
real.
No, I was gonna say if there was any doubt that this was a political move, you just have to look at who they chose for athlete of the year, and the reason why this is turning people off so much is because it's been more of this. It's more of this same media establishment, governments, all trying to push this man-made global warming theory on people, and people are sick of it. And I don't even think Greta meets the standard that Time magazine itself sets for person of the year. It's supposed to be somebody who's had a lot of influence, and she's had zero influence. She's changed nobody's minds. All she's done is harden people's hearts. Nothing has changed. She's literally accomplished nothing. And it's blatantly political. It's blatantly trying to push man-made global warming theory on people. And she's done jack crap for anybody. And it clearly should have been the Hong Kong protester.
wait,
And
wait,
I think there's no doubt about that.
Are you denying that
Are you
climate
denying
change
that?
is all man-made, or is it are you saying some of it is man-made and some of it is not, or are you saying it is all natural? No man-made, we have no impact on the climate.
I'd say man might have like 0.000001% of impact.
Oh my
So
god!
let me ask you
You guys
this.
don't
Let me
know
ask you
Lecture
this,
Fan.
Lecture Fan. What is it? What sources do you base that on that are better than, say, ExxonMobil sources that say, yeah, if we keep doing this, the Earth's going to catch fire, guys? This is bad news bears. I mean, we need to keep doing it because we make a lot of money. But where are your sources that are more on point on this than, say, ExxonMobil and the oil companies that knew this was going to happen in the 70s and 80s?
Sure, some of the top climate scientists in the world are skeptical of the man-made global warming theory, including Richard Lindzen.
No, we're saying it's
Primarily.
related. We're saying, okay, let's say that right now, let's say our general consensus here is that yes, the Earth heats and cools, but it's going in a standard that we have never seen before in history. Most likely caused through coal, through whatever we're doing to our environment. Do you think that's false? Do you think that's
Yes.
not true?
False.
Tree, you agree?
Actually, I believe in. I was actually a climate change denier, and no more. I actually believe that, based upon
Good.
the evidence that Touring News had presented, he basically provided some evidence which people are happy to debate about this, but I was really shocked at the studies he was showing me, at the basically presentations he was presenting to me, and it was something that was, the cause and effect in reference to emissions, and I was, this was stuff I was totally not aware of it. And like I said, it made me go back and rethink my position on climate change. And I mean, I've
Tree,
actually started to change my mind about it.
let me ask you a question, Tree. Why do you think you were open to listening to Turing? Because I'm sure other people have tried to present this stuff to you. Why do you? What was it about Turing that made you listen?
Turing is Turing is a very unique character. First of all, I'm very fiery. I'm very confrontational. You know what I'm saying? And I
Really?
came and I was on Demon Machine's channel, as you know, I am really important. And then he raided Turing. And so Turing was reading something in reference to Syria. And so I was like, oh, another lefty. Ooh, he's getting triggered and shit like that. And so I decided to ask him a question, right? So I just wanted to see if he was going to block me or if he was going to yell at me or whatever. And he looked at so I said, what is your position? I remember the question. I said, Turing News, what is your opinion in reference to Trump pulling troops out of Syria? So he looked at my question and he said, oh, hi, TreeofLogic. And it wasn't like, no, hi, TreeofLogic. It was like, oh, hi, TreeofLogic. He said, he says, I don't know yet. I want to give you the best answer I can. So let me give some thought to it. I was like, wow, somebody's giving a thought to a fucking answer before giving it to me, and they're not giving me talking points. And so I was immediately impressed by that. And then after basically about 10, 15 minutes, he says, okay, TreeofLogic, I have my answer. I am against what Trump is doing. And then he began to give an explanation of why he felt that way. He also backed it up by citations, which is very rare on Twitch, by the way. And I was like, damn, I like this guy. And I instantly followed him, and I've been like watching his shit since then, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
So yeah.
All right. I appreciate you sharing that. It's an interesting story, you know what I mean? Turing News doing the Lord's work out here.
He's smooth. To me, if you want to talk to somebody like me who's, very fiery, it's going to have to take the thing about water. You know how you get sand is by water slowly breaks down the rock. Yeah, it breaks down the rock and turn it into sand. And that's I consider that what he did with me, because I'm already on guard when I'm on Twitch. I'm ready to argue, fight, and I'm ready to do everything. But it's like when you don't bring me that energy back, it disarms me. It actually it's like kryptonite. I'm defenseless against it.
I told you got a squishy center. I know.
Oh,
no, I do not.
Turing News. You better watch out. Some fan fiction might be incoming after that.
Wow. Put that energy out
Happens
there.
to me.
Thanks a lot, Mr.
Do it,
Put it
Chad.
out
That's what I
there.
have to commission.
So I mean, he's got a different approach, but I enjoy it for sure. So I really maybe Turing News can talk lecture fans sometime, because I am really curious how you can push against the consensus of science.
There is no consensus.
The consensus
The American
is
Association for the
there.
Advancement of Science is 97% of climate scientists are
The
right on.
97% is a lie.
To the last subject, the consensus is at least as strong as it is for the fact that free trade is universal.
You were literally into science denialism
super strong
here. This is
Let me
dangerous
try.
stuff.
Can I
want
try?
to attack this from a different angle.
Look-
LCTRfan.
No,
Even if you don't think global warming is real or whatever, even if you don't think that, do you still acknowledge that there's a lot of other arguments for focusing on renewable energy?
Sure, I'm all in favor of renewable energy if it's done by the private sector and not done through a government subsidy that results in things like Solyndra.
I mean, ordinarily I'd agree, but because climate change is a fact, we need government to speed along the process. I mean, it's an existential threat. Otherwise, I'd be all for it, or all with what you're saying. Yeah, burn the coal and burn the natural gas, because if there's no environmental impact, it's cheaper and whatever. But the environmental impact is there and it's real, and I don't know how you can ignore that. I mean, I wish it wasn't real. It would simplify kind of my belief in free market capitalism a lot to be able to just say, well, green is the new red. It's all a lie. But I mean, it's not.
LCTRfan, don't you think, okay, regardless of the global warming part, what about what we were talking about, Bastiat just mentioned, the other environmental effects, right? That we know, like, our water gets polluted. Even if you don't think like global warming in general, we do know that it affects our atmosphere in the sense that it lowers our air quality, can cause like long-term cancer depending on where you're from, you know, things like that, that it can affect our soil negatively, affect our crops. What about all those environmental impacts that we know happen?
Well, that's actually one of the problems that I have with the man-made global warming theory is it actually does a disservice to traditional conservationism and traditional environmentalism, to where instead of actually focusing on saving the rainforests or preserving our forests or clean air and clean water, there's this overriding obsession with pushing socialism as a way to try to cure climate change, which is what the Green New Deal is. The first three things on the Green New Deal is free college for everybody, a guaranteed government job, and free and free healthcare for everybody. So it's clearly a ruse to push that kind of nonsense. And one of my primary disagreements with it is that it actually distracts and confuses us and gets us to not focus on actually doing what's best for the environment. And the question I'd ask Bastiat and Leon, I don't know why you're acting so surprised. Most Americans agree with me
what you're saying right now is so stupid. I can't contain myself right now.
All right, let me ask you this.
When you're going to science annihilation, this is absolutely ridiculous.
Okay, let me ask you this, Leon. Let me ask you this.
Go.
Why did the Earth's temperature go down between 1940 and 1980 at a time when CO2 temperatures or CO2 emissions were skyrocketing?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know. My PhD is in technology management. But if I wanted to find out, maybe we could look online and find out what some studies are. Maybe we can look at what NASA says. Maybe we can look at what all these organizations say.
There's no denialism.
Why is it when?
There's no denialism in saying I trust the judgment of experts in the field and the consensus of the experts.
So do I.
I don't understand gravity on a personal level, but I trust the experts.
Can I say one thing? The top mind that LCTRfan referenced, Richard Linson, who we referenced earlier when we asked for a name, is someone who's been retired for over half a decade. That's your top mind. It's someone who's been retired since 2013.
There's lots more, but he's still active in the
this global
scientific community.
I'm not sure where you're getting this notion that temperatures like cratered for 40 years, because it looks like after the Industrial Revolution, just from my look here, I mean, they really start to go up, and then in the last 50 years, like the graph is almost vertical. I mean,
no, the hockey stick graph has been proven false.
No, I mean, what do you mean by that? Who has proven it false?
What?
Everybody,
let me ask you this.
Everybody.
That was all because they never took into account urban heat sinks, and so the hockey stick graph in Al Gore's movie has been completely proven wrong. So you don't have an answer either about why the Earth's temperatures went down between 1940 and 1980.
No, I'm rejecting your notion based on the data I'm seeing right here. The notion that the Earth's temperature went down, it fluctuated a lot during that time period, but the graph has a very clear upward slope. Absolutely. So like I don't accept that premise, and I also don't understand why it is that I guess what you're saying is that basically almost everybody's wrong, not just the socialists. Like I'll grant you, Green New Deal is totally Green New Deal seems like totally like socialism through the green door, but that doesn't mean that like environmental projects are a bad idea or that fighting climate change is a bad idea just because you're right. The Green New Deal might be absurd, but I mean, like it's not just people who are socially inclined who are down with this. I mean, it's large energy companies who have everything to lose by this, who are acknowledging that it is real and that ultimately.
Look, if you want to trust the climate scientists who have a financial incentive to say global warming is a huge problem due to their government grants, I'll trust the independent experts, and you can trust the ones that have a financial conflict of interest.
Wait, the independent experts that are also financed by like coal and oil companies? Question mark.
Like, yeah, I mean, coal. For example,
I'm saying the ones that you should not trust are the ones that are financed by the government. That's the real conflict.
So we should trust the ones by private corporations that gain a larger incentive to.
No, independent scientists that question the theory.
Yeah, but
So-
every scientist is backed by some form of money. You don't make money from research.
Yeah,
Like
grants
in
are tough.
9% of cases, you make your money from grants, right? You're
So, like, is all
you're given
research-
grants for your research.
Is all
Most of
research
it is
therefore
government
compromised?
funded. Yeah, that's the problem. It's like most scientists use a combination of government and non-government like grants. So
Well,
and most of them do take from the government. Like for all
Exactly. In
pharmaceutical
fact,
studies, are all pharmaceutical studies bullshit because they take money from the government? Or
No,
no,
if you actually
obviously
look at
not.
if you actually look at the size of the man-made global warming industry, it's skyrocketed. It used to be like in the 80s and 90s, which, by the way, man-made global warming started out as a political movement by Margaret Thatcher in Britain in the 80s, which you guys probably don't know about either. But if you actually look at the growth of funding for man-made global warming theory, it's skyrocketed. It used to be like $1 million, $2 million a year. Now it's billions and billions of dollars.
Because
and
it was
it's a
legitimate.
Are you
Yeah.
seriously
huge
dragging her
self-perpetuating
holy,
interest.
Are you seriously dragging Her Holiness Margaret Thatcher, hero of freedom and free markets, who helped tear down the Berlin Wall?
Yeah, that's
and
how-
you're saying
that's how
basically
men-
she
yeah, that's
made
how-
climate change, like for some political interest. She had nothing to gain. Like climate change was absolutely
She did,
antithetical
actually.
to
No,
her
she did.
entire worldview. It screws
Nope,
everything up if you believe in freedom.
No,
because
she did have-
it's
she
a
had great
giant
reasons.
externality that government has to do something
Also-
about. So
also,
why
Todd-
wouldn't she, of all people, gin this up?
That's a good point.
Well, I can tell you.
Yeah.
Well, I have an
It's
answer.
really
though.
not
I have
that
an
hard.
answer to the
Oh,
question.
I
have
wanna
an
hear
answer to
yours.
Dan's question.
Yeah. Why did she gin
Okay,
it up?
so the reason is because she was in a political battle with the union, the coal miner union.
And you're saying she brought this up to destroy coal?
That's
Because
how it got
the
started.
reason
It's been a
coal is
political
dying
movement.
is
That's
not
how
because
the theory got
it's-
started.
Yeah, the reason coal is dying, both in the 80s in Great Britain and today in the United States, the reason it's dying is because natural gas is so much more efficient and government subsidized coal mining.
That's got
is
nothing to do. That's got nothing to do
uneconomical.
with.
So this
that's got
idea
nothing
that
to
she
do with the
needed to gin
fact-
this up to fight coal mines. I mean, she
It wasn't coal mines. That's not what I said. I said it was the
You're
unions.
saying it was in a battle with the unions and coal. She was engaged in
That's how it
climate change
started.
advocacy long after she was out of office. So like this notion that it was some temporary expedient to defeat unions in Britain, I mean, there's no basis for that at all.
That's how it got started.
Yo, North, you
Does
had
it
a.
really matter how
It
it
seemed
got started
like
if
you had
it's
a,
true?
an approach.
I have an
No,
answer. I have an answer to the local cooling. Okay, so in reference to the local cooling present between 1940 and 1972, I believe. 1940, 1970-ish, just as a general.
So you
just as a
okay? So
general
we're
era.
finally at least admitting that I was right, that the
No,
temperatures
no,
did
you
go
are right.
down
You are
between
100% right.
1940 and
You are
1980.
100% right. There was a local
Nailed it.
sort of dip
Whoosh.
in the temperatures. I didn't say that wasn't true.
Hey, can you
It
drop?
was
Yeah,
because
can you
of-
send me this? I want to see
Yeah,
this.
so
Yeah, I
it's
wanna
I'm
see-
educating
it's
you
from-
guys on science.
It's from it's from a random. It's just like I googled it,
Okay,
and
answer
it
the
was
question.
okay. Sulfate aerosols. Sulfate aerosols were banned in the Clean Air Act of the Clean Air Acts like in the late 70s or mid 70s, and sulfate aerosol, which is evidenced by the
yeah,
eruption of Mount
skepticalscience.com, right?
Ogang in 1963, produced aerosols which cooled the lower atmosphere by half a degree Celsius. So like just like one eruption of sulfates caused the entire like lower atmosphere around it to lower by 0.5, and we were aggressively using sulfate aerosols in the aftermath of World War II. So but from the aftermath of World War II into the Clean Air Acts, there was a local cooling effect because of these sulfates aerosols, which have a
Right.
whole fucking
That's-
litany of things that
which
that
is-
they cause that are bad, right? So
Which is,
obviously
I
we don't
love
have
that. It's so preposterous to say man-made CO2 emissions were causing these skyrocketing temperatures, and the only thing that caused this sort of temporary reduction was other man-made things like.
Well, I mean,
Everything
when-
man does
when the
control, the
explosion of
sun doesn't
one-
have any impact on the climate. No, it's not the sun. It's all just man-made this and man-made that. Let me ask you guys this. Considering that climate change predictions are 0 for 41, they've been making predictions for 50 years and 40 years, and they've been wrong 41 times in a row. Why do you guys believe the 42nd prediction?
What do you mean they've been wrong like 40 seconds?
He's talking about the rate of change.
Yeah,
There-
can you
there's-
send us a
there's-
slide on
Bastiat,
this
you're
or
muted.
something?
I don't know. if
Do
you're-
you guys not know that every man-made global warming prediction has been wrong?
Not every.
Made by whom?
Well,
NASA?
let's start with the United Nations Interpanel on Climate Change. For one, in 1989, predicted that entire nations would be underwater by the year 2000 if we didn't stop man-made global warming. You guys don't know any of this stuff. It's incredible.
You don't think that we've actually have, passed laws from here to then that have tried to reduce at least carbon in the United States little by little?
CO2
Also, we only had $1 million.
since
We only had $1
1989.
million in our research back then, according to you. So I mean, like the research obviously was pretty fucking shoddy back then when we had pennies to the dollar of what we have
Still
now.
pretty shoddy. Still pretty shoddy.
I mean, right? So we should put more money into it. I agree. I'm with you on it.
Okay,
No,
all right,
you guys
hold
are
on.
saying
Clearly-
it's a
clearly if people
consensus.
aren't-
Why? Let me ask you guys this then. If you guys don't have an answer for why the predictions have been wrong, let me ask you this: why do we need billions and billions and billions of dollars if the science is settled and it's consensus and we already know?
We
Because
need
even
billions
if
of dollars,
consensus
one,
comes-
Yeah, why would we
apparently to
invest
convince
money?
those who are still not convinced that this is happening, and two, for a crash program on renewables and nuclear energy to deal with climate change. Yeah, it's going to be very expensive.
No, I'm
to
talking about
address.
funding for climate researchers who say man-made global warming is a huge problem.
Well, I mean, naturally, if you're going to be spending a lot of money on any program, you're going to want to back it up with good research. But I've got a source here from Forbes with charts and with data, thanks to our friends from the Surfs TV. Thanks for this. That says this was a paper published in 1967 that said, according to our estimate, a doubling of the CO2 content in the atmosphere has the effect of raising the temperature of the atmosphere by about 2 degrees centigrade. And sure enough, since that time, that is what has panned out. I'll drop this link in the chat if anybody wants to check it out. I'm going to drop it in the Discord we're talking about and in the group chat, so you can see
You
it.
didn't
and
know
respond
that,
if you
did
want.
you, lecture fan? You didn't know that.
I'll drop
It's
this
really
here.
personal.
Check it out.
It feels
There's
so
one.
personal. It's like you didn't know. Like, okay, I didn't. I just wanted to say that I've watched Lecture Fan stream, and I actually have asked him about climate change before, and I shouldn't say I appreciate, but I've heard the perspective, and I think it's important to listen to perspectives of others. North earlier was going to say something, and he got sort of trampled. But you were going to make an appeal to Lecture Fan that possibly no one had yet, or there was a way you were going to convince him. I just want to hear how do we look? Maybe Lecture Fan's right, but if he's not, and there's some value in convincing people of climate change who are pretty stubborn, did you have a tactic or an idea that you think could spark?
Well.
No, I was talking to North Mage specifically.
Yeah, I know.
He was going to say something. It's been a while. Sorry.
I forget what I was going to say.
Sorry for asking
I did
so
have
late.
something lined up, but yeah, no, I can't remember what it was.
Yeah,
Because
sorry
it
for
was
getting
something specific, but now I'm going to sit here and be angry that I can't remember it for half an hour.
It'll come back to you.
Okay.
It'll
It'll
come back.
to you.
Well, I have some things, right? I mean, here you're saying, oh no, we should only do it for we should only do it through the free market. But when we have externalities that we at least see affecting local populations really badly, I think that's one of the few times the government's supposed to step in and be like, whoa, we can't just let you poison waterways of civilians living in the States who use this water, who drink it, who can be really fucked up because you're just wasting your chemicals through here or dumping them through here, right? I think that's a very reasonable stance. I think it's a reasonable stance to be well, with places that have really high amounts of CO2, you have higher rates of asthma, you have a higher chance of getting lung cancer and other diseases. So yeah, we should try to lower carbon emissions through that, right? This isn't just a thing about any luxury good. It's a thing that we know, even if you don't believe in global warming, we know that at least in the local environmental level, these actions really do impact the local populace there and can lead to really bad long-term negative changes there for people, right?
That's not from CO2 though. That's from the other things that are associated with the same type of industries that produce CO2. In fact, the co-founder of Greenpeace has started a CO2 is life group because CO2 is actually one of the most wonderful things on Earth. It's the building block of life. Plants need CO2 to actually grow, and so there's been times
CO2 is bad though, right? Just like anything else.
CO2 is good.
Too much
CO2
of it.
This is so good. Literally, energy companies put out
science.
movies in the early 80s about this issue called the greening of the earth, where they made the same argument back when they had the information internally that climate change was happening, but were trying to say externally that it wasn't happening. So that argument that CO2 will make the earth blossom. I mean, it is just so simplistic.
Go to China.
It is so
we don't
simplistic.
need-
The deoxygenation of the oceans, for example, that has happened as a result of the increase in CO2 in the atmosphere and the consequent warming of the planet is ruining ecosystems. We're going to see serious collapses of our oceanic ecosystems in the decades to come, and it's going to be tragic. It's already going on. You can see it in the bleaching of sea I say coral reefs all over the world, the Great Barrier
All of
Reef being
these.
one of the most tragic examples. Like this stuff is happening, and the people
many
who did it
no,
know
it's all
it is
predictions.
happening.
No, if you think
It's
CO2
not-
is
it's
good,
not-
go
it's
to
not- it's
go
not-
to
it's not-
fucking China. There's a reason why people in China and India
I've been to China.
wear masks, right?
And India.
Like,
Yeah, no, I mean,
yeah, there's
that-
a very real reason for that. Because too much CO2 is bad.
It's
for your
not from the
lungs, period.
CO2.
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
from actual
smog.
pollution.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
pollution
It's
as
not from the
well.
It's not from the
CO2.
CO2. It's
Okay.
not from the
Can I read
CO2.
off a prediction
Sure.
right now I found? So here's a prediction. This is an interview with the Associated Press from a United Nations official from 1989, which I'm assuming is what you're talking about, right?
Yep, that's the one. Yep,
Yeah,
the 1989 UN IPCC predictions.
Yeah, looking at it right now. Says entire nations
nations.
could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea
Yep.
levels if the global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000. That's not
2000.
stating they'll be underwater by
didn't happen.
2000. They're just saying this is going to start happening if we haven't reversed it by 2000.
No, that's not what they meant.
That is
If you actually
absolute.
look at-
You're a lawyer. Don't give me this crap.
You
know
can actually look
exactly
at
what
the
it's
actual
saying.
look at the actual report. The UN report from 1989 is like 300, 400 pages long. It's full of these doomsday predictions there's so many of them. There's literally 41 different man-made global warming predictions that have all been proven false. And so I don't understand why you guys still believe this stuff when it's been
No,
proven
you're
false.
easily misrepresenting what's being said here.
Lecture
Can I-
fan got
can I-
at
can I
one
make a
point
second-
earlier
can I
that I
make a
think is worth
separate-
noting, which is, and then I'll
Yeah,
let you
no,
go
no,
on
go
that.
ahead.
One point here, which is that coal interests, as far as I know, are really the only energy interests that are still actively fighting tooth and nail against climate change, because coal is so uneconomical now compared to basically natural gas and renewables, that all the coal industry has basically left is to fight against any kind of government regulation it can. It's desperate. And so, yeah, that's why people like President Trump's allies in the coal industry are still fighting climate change. Most of the energy industry has acknowledged that it is real. Even the companies, again, like ExxonMobil, for example, that originally were actively pushing against it in the 80s. So like that's who's bankrolling as far as I can see.
If the fossil fuel industries say it's true, then it must be true, I guess.
Look,
right?
again, they were the ones that first of all were trying to cover up its existence after internally recognizing that it was real. So I mean, I don't know at this point, like where were those internal memos faked for some political purpose? I mean, that they were entirely focused on profit and nevertheless coming to the same conclusions that people are arguing for today, that this is a real threat.
If that's true, then why did the climate researchers have been proven to be faking the global warming numbers in the ClimateGate scandal, where emails were exposed and they were literally shown to have been falsifying the numbers? I mean, it's undisputed.
You found like one corrupt study. I mean.
No, there's tons of them.
I mean, that's like saying that vaccines, must cause autism because the one study that, again, had fake numbers and was faked to, like, look that way. I mean, yeah, sometimes there are bad actors in science, but I don't think that undermines the scientific consensus as a whole.
Lecture, do I dare ask your thoughts on vaccines?
Yes, ask.
Well, Mage
Please,
has something to say
yeah,
about
yeah.
it first, right?
One thing at a time.
I'm good
One thing
with
at a time.
vaccines.
Because actually, I have a different appeal. Do you disagree with, like, do you fundamentally disagree with the science behind CO2 being able to absorb and re-emit infrared radiation? Do you disagree?
No,
with
here's the thing. I believe in science. One of the reasons that I don't believe in man-made global warming is because I love science and I've spent a lot of time researching these issues. Nobody disputes the greenhouse gas effect and that CO2, how the greenhouse effect works, and the rays bouncing and then bouncing back up and hitting CO2. Nobody disputes that aspect of it. It's all about how much of the Earth's changes in temperatures are driven by man and how much are driven by natural cycles. I mean, the climate is one of the most complex systems known to man, and we do not understand it entirely. There are ocean currents and ocean cycles that go on 1,000+ year cycles that we do not understand. And anybody that's fair-minded and not bought and paid for by these government grants, that's fair-minded, that looks at this, will admit to you that this is an incredibly complex system. We do not understand it. And this idea, and one of the reasons I'm so skeptical of all you people that believe in this stuff is because you're saying that we understand one of the most complex things known to man. We understand
We're
it
not saying-
perfectly.
we're not saying
the
we
science
understand
is
it
settled.
perfectly,
The
though.
consensus is settled, and we have to implement these far left, hard left policies
the
to fix it.
Why are
consensus-
these
That's
far
not
left? They
believable.
shouldn't be.
No, but the consensus is not that we understand everything. The consensus is not that we have a perfect understanding. I agree completely with that. It is a very complex system that is very difficult to understand in all of its entirety, right? The ocean cycles, right? The natural warming and cooling of the globe, like that happens, and we're not fully aware of it. Other things that we might introduce into the atmosphere, right? We're not fully aware of the portrait that we paint. However, to say that, right, like when we understand the greenhouse effect, we're dumping however many billions of tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, there is consensus that makes things hotter. That's the only consensus there is. There's no consensus outside of that.
Can I ask a question?
The dumping of those chemicals is causing the globe to warm because the atmosphere traps more heat. Pure and simple.
I want to hear
There's
from
consensus
Tree.
on that.
Yeah, Tree, go ahead.
Because I'm still learning. I just wanted to know, like, there are icebergs that are disappearing, and it's never happened before. Can you, all those of you who are more knowledgeable about this, can you tell me why that's happening?
Sorry, can you say it again?
There are icebergs that are disappearing, and it's the fact that they have been there for centuries, them totally melting away, it has never happened before. So basically, I just wanted to know why. Can somebody explain why is that happening now?
Are you suggesting that they never melted during the medieval warm period or the Holocene maximum?
From what I'm being told, no, it has not been that way. The scientists have.
Okay, why did the icebergs not melt during
you can't.
the medieval
I'm
warm
a student.
period?
I don't know. I'm here.
Well, you
to
just said it's
learn.
never happened before.
They're
so you
saying that
obviously
it
do
never
know.
happened before.
I
No,
think somebody.
Electric Fan, I said they said it. I'm repeating what they're fucking saying.
Like you can
Oh,
see the
okay,
warming
okay.
temperatures in the way that the ice caps are shrinking on a year-to-year basis over the last like 60 years. The way that ice shelves in Antarctica are collapsing. So like you're right that like icebergs, I guess, have melted in the past, but like the scale of what's going
So they
on is unprecedented.
have melted in the past.
I mean, I'm sure icebergs have broken off and sailed north and melted in the past. I mean that, but what I'm talking about is like the notion of like the scale of the melting that's going on now and the degree of like
It is the
collapse of ice
scale,
shelves that's going on now is what's unprecedented. And let me ask you this, lecture fan. So do you believe that like the hole in the ozone was man-made, or is that also like a natural thing?
I haven't really. I've barely looked into that, but
Because I feel like if the notion is human beings really can't cause climatic change, I mean that right there is an example that the consensus for that being human cause is even greater. And right there,
but that's
people
not a
banded
climate
together.
thing.
That is definitely a climate thing. I mean, the ozone has huge climatic impacts. The hole in the ozone, therefore, had them as well. I mean, that was a literal example in the 20th century of not only a problem being caused by human activity, but the problem being gradually rolled back by the reduction in that human activity.
Well, that I just don't think you can compare a tiny piece of the ozone, which is a tiny piece of just the atmosphere, to the entire climate, including all of the oceans and everything else. And furthermore, to talk about this glacier, the icebergs melting and stuff, so much of that has been just hyped up beyond all recognition, and so much misinformation out there. Well, they'll take pictures of glaciers in the summertime and then compare it to pictures of glaciers from 1910 that were taken in the winter. It's hilarious. In Montana,
okay.
I follow I follow Glacier National Park news, and so actually Glacier National Park had like whatever those like panels that you can walk up to when you're in Glacier National Park, and those panels literally were telling people that visited Glacier National Park here in northwest Montana that the glaciers in Glacier National Park were going to be gone by 2020. And guess what? Just this year they changed those, because guess what? The glaciers in Glacier National Park are not gone.
Well, it's a good thing they're not gone, because glaciers in the rest of the continental United States, to the extent they ever existed, are gone. And glaciers in lots of parts of the world have seen serious retreat. And I guess you can say that all the pictures have been, since 1850 have been faked. But I don't think that's true. I guess I don't know that you're saying that, but like the notion that all of this information
it's like either faked or twisted in some way to be misrepresented. I mean, I just don't. I don't think that's fair to say at all.
Well, the scientists that I've listened to and studied suggest that a lot of the man-made global warming science is bad science. It's manipulated. It's not very rigorous. It way overstates the evidence that they found, and it makes perfect sense because those people have a financial incentive.
The people have a financial incentive to lie too. There's no winning here.
Every form of science has a form of financial incentive when it's backed by grants. I assure you that both sides of this are backed by grants. They need findings that are
all right. So if we're
support what they want to continue.
If we're all willing to not attack either side's scientists because of where their funding comes from.
But you look at the science itself. You look at the science itself. You look at what CO2 does. You look at what CO2 does, and them saying, okay, there's no effect when we are dumping billions of tons of a chemical that fucking increases the amount of heat that we trap in the atmosphere, and saying, well, there's probably no effect on the atmosphere.
Yeah, especially when you were claiming that it's like it's good for plants, which I mean, I guess, but I mean, how can it have a positive global effect and yet the negatives of it? Well, that's impossible.
I guess my question would be like,
well, I'm saying CO. If you literally do studies where you actually have like contained atmospheres and grow two plants, the exact same plants in the exact same sort of controlled environments, and one of those environments has higher CO2, that plant will grow very much faster. And that's undisputed. I mean, I've got a fish tank and I have aquatic plants, and one of the things that you do as an aquatic plant gardener is you actually get CO2 in pressurized containers, and you actually put CO2 into your water, and it helps your plants grow. This is not like up for debate that CO2
what kind
is
of
good for
marijuana?
plants.
What kind of marijuana are you growing there, Lecture?
I don't think marijuana grows underwater, does it?
Well, they do have hydroponics, right? I don't know.
Hydroponics.
He's
I
too
don't know
much
anybody growing
professional.
plants like that.
So, Lecture, I wanted to ask Lecture a question, if I can, Bastiat. So I've been to your stream a couple of times, and we've had this conversation. And I usually just listen. I don't speak because my climate change research, like Tree was saying earlier, it's just I'm a student and I'm trying to absorb information.
We're just trying to learn.
Oh, that's cool.
Yep. And a lot of the research seems to support the position that I'm under. It makes the most sense to me, so I'll subscribe to it. But let's like if I were to concede that there's some validity to what you're saying, and you were to concede to the other side, I mean, like, what is the risk, right? So if we say that the climate is changing and we take this action to resolve it, I mean, what do we stand to lose? Because if you're wrong, right?
Oh, good question.
There's serious fucking problems. No, I mean, it could be cataclysmic if you're wrong, but if you're right, what? All this funding.
Well, no, I think, Andre, that's one of the reasons that I'm skeptical of the man-made global warming theory, is that it's been politicized by the left. The left has taken what is supposed to be a scientific thing, and they've politicized it, and they're using it to produce push their far left policies. And let's take the Green New Deal. Let's talk about the Green New Deal, for example, because that's the primary policy. It's a horrific, it'll destroy the American economy. And so you're saying, hey, let's just do it because it'll be. It'll be.
I mean,
It would be severely bad for the. So your idea that let's just do it because even if we're wrong, it'll still be. No, it would be terrible to go forward with these leftist policy proposals.
Just because a bunch of commies proposed a bad idea in the form of the Green New Deal doesn't mean that like the idea of climate change is invalidated or proven to be a political sham any more than like veganism because it had some adherents among the Nazis is some kind of terrible idea. Because it has some bad adherents. I mean, obviously, I'm not down with the Green New Deal, but I mean, I don't think you have to. Nice. I think you can reject the Green New Deal as bad policy while nevertheless recognizing that human beings are causing climate change.
I think when I was in your stream, we even had this concession that like if we're making changes to make the world a better place, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Even if we reject the Green New Deal, which I like, and maybe that makes me a filthy socialist, but even if we reject the Green New Deal, right? Like we still can acknowledge that there's a risk here, right? If you're wrong, because again, I think that's something that I think we all have to do, right? When we say, like you said earlier, climate is a complicated issue and we can't be certain, right? None of us can be. So, I mean, wouldn't it make more sense to err on the side of caution, or?
Well,
I don't think so, because I think the costs of, and if people have other policy proposals to do with, I bring up the Green New Deal because that's the primary one that's been proposed.
Sure.
But no, I think on the substance, it's terrible, and it's way too costly. Even if we're all gonna die, I guess if we're all gonna die in 10 years, then it's okay.
Whoa. So here's the thing.
Like seriously, if we're all going to die in 10 years, then I would say.
No, but what about the Paris Climate Agreement? I don't think that the Green New Deal is like the major proposal. I think the Paris Climate Agreement is one that stands far more like universally, like sort of there's a more universal consensus around the Paris Agreement. Do you disagree with the tenets of the Paris Agreement if we're being cautious? And
I
why?
do disagree with primarily because it's not fair to the United States, and it requires the United States to pay all this money and do all this stuff, and it doesn't have the same requirements on developing countries, which frankly I think is honestly one of the reasons that the global warming fanatics are a little bit, I guess, misguided, is because here's all these, rich Westerners in these rich developed countries trying to tell people in Africa and people in Asia that no, you can't build any power plants, no, you can't develop, no, you can't drive cars, it's going to hurt the climate, and it's quite unfair.
Are you aware of the way in which so here's my perspective that I'll try and share with you. The reason why I think that is prevalent, right, like in terms of the United States and the developed countries having to, sort of pay more, contribute more, is because of the process of industrialization for a country doesn't involve you directly going to renewable energy. Renewable energy is expensive. No one's disagreeing with that, especially in its current state. It's not economically viable. And your entire point, correct me if I'm wrong, was that you need those, like you want it to be through free market initiatives. Right now, if we're saying it can't be through free market initiatives, we have to have the people who can pay for these things, the rich, to pay for these things, right? So it has to be the developed countries who take the majority of the burden over these developing countries that don't have the economic viability to sustain themselves through renewable resources with their current wealth. I think that's
I understand that. I understand.
That's fair. I get that. If that's the case, and where we're currently headed, potentially, right? If you just accept the hypothetical that we will, like the Earth will head to catastrophe, say in 100 years, if we don't right our course, then if we're on the side of caution. No, but let's say 100 years, right?
It's
12 years, I think, before certain irreversible change.
After that, it'll be something else, right? But say in 100 years, we'll start to experience like intense global catastrophic events, right? Yeah. Wouldn't it be worth it to err on the side of caution now and shirk some economic issues for the sake of furthering potentially the entire human race? Is that not a fair trade, right? Taking some bad trade deals so we don't all die.
Yeah, if we're all gonna die, then sure, we can do whatever. It doesn't matter. We're all gonna die. But
no,
that's the problem, though. It's
the problem. We don't want to die.
It's not that we're all going to die. It's that life's going to get much more difficult, expensive, and difficult, and some people are going to die. But for the most part, we're going to live in a world that is going to be considerably more barren. A lot of people will die.
Saying forever.
Most American, probably very few people in America will by comparison, but like life is going to be much more difficult. The earth is going to be much more barren. It's going to be much more difficult to sustain the kind of agriculture we sustain today. The world is going to be a much more difficult and less hospitable place. So you don't have to say like the entire planet is going to die. Human beings are going to go extinct. Like there are going to be serious consequences all over the world.
Right.
And the question is like, do we deal with them?
Apocalypse, right?
Yeah.
The global catastrophic event is these lesser populations getting killed off. It is the barrenness of the earth increasing.
Yeah, and it's like, do we try to deal with them now while it's cheaper, or in 2050 or 2100, do we deal with them then when it is considerably harder to do so because we've added that much more CO2 to the atmosphere and caused that much more destruction to the planet? And one other thing to say, if we don't deal with this stuff now, we're going to end up with some real strange solutions down the line when it gets much more difficult. Like there are already talks about pumping silver nitrate into the atmosphere to ameliorate some of the effects of climate change, which would be a pretty cheap and simple thing to do. And yet, while that would cool the planet, nobody has any idea about what kind of effects it would have on the rest of the world's ecosystems. So like if we don't deal with this stuff now in more conventional fashions, the solutions are going to get more and more extreme too.
Wow, I guess I just have more faith in technological progress and the free markets than you do, Bastiat, because there's no reason
He's calling you a pussy.
Oh,
There's no reason.
hey, that basically is calling me one in my world.
That
I'm
is
down.
that's
I knew you would. I knew that would.
He
No,
just
I
called
knew
you
that
a
would.
bitch.
I knew that would strike deep, cut
No,
deep.
that's
So,
good.
but no, I mean, so hold on. The primary problem with all of these questions is they're all premised on this assumption that the 40-second prediction about all of these terrible things that's going to happen
That's not
is going to
even
be
true.
right.
Stop
when
saying
it's gonna
that.
be wrong. And but more importantly, I really do think that like technological I'm all in favor of green energy. I mean, I don't like windmills because they look terrible, and especially in a place like Montana, I think they're awful. But I'm all in favor of solar energy and do all these things if it's economically viable, if it makes sense. And I do have confidence that as time goes on, we will develop these other sources of energy, and it'll be a wonderful thing. And there's absolutely no reason to start implementing all of these insane policy proposals right now based on some assumption about, oh my gosh, we're all going to die if we don't do it in 12 years. It's complete fear-mongering BS. And here's the other thing. If you guys actually had all of the science and all of the data and everything on your side, then you guys wouldn't be trying to shut down all of the debate. You would actually, real scientific theories welcome the questioning. Welcome the debate. Trying to shut down the debate and trying to say, you can't just, oh my gosh, you're a denier, you can't deny this. Oh my God.
We should
know that
The
they
problem with debate format is it's hoping that the other side won't be true.
I'm gonna talk.
Yeah.
We shut down anti-vaxxers all the time, right? And because the problem is, even if you have a shit ton of science on your side, in a lot of places, once you start entertaining this topic, you have a few people who are like, I don't know, worried parents, for example, who are like, oh, maybe there's some truth to that, and then start doing like insane things in regards to it because they don't have all the data. So it makes sense for a lot of people to shut down the debate. But anyways, LCTRfan, regardless of that, I'm just kind of upset because here we were earlier talking about China and talking about wanting to stop, well, not exactly completely stop trade, but wanting to like hurt them economically, right? Because what they're doing is like really fucked up. And don't you think that there's an argument for that to be made in renewable energy as well? Like, Europe can't even put sanctions on Russia when they try to invade Crimea because they threatened to like shut down their natural gas, right? Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, they get away with a fuck ton of like really fucked up shit because they get to sell their oil so freaking damn cheap. If we have renewable energy and if we accelerate that process, we take away the power from those really like strong nations kind of permanently.
Okay, here's the problem
I'm
with
dying
that.
of smoke inhalation because Pxie is on fire right now.
I don't agree. I don't agree with Bastiat and Pxie thinking that it's the job of the government to be a bunch of venture capitalists and take taxpayer money and start venture capitalized investing in renewable energies. I think we ought to have freedom and allow people to invest their money where they want. There's no reason for the government to become a bunch of venture capitalists and start investing in renewable energy because you think it's a great business decision.
Wait, so you don't think that the government should involve itself with China at all then in that sense, right? Like, here they are like meddling economically, being like, venture capitalists if they interfere with other nations and try to pull them up to fight against China, economically speaking. Like, since that's not the government, I just don't understand how you can hold these 2 points of views.
Well, I actually, if that was your reasoning for saying that the U.S. should invest in renewable energies, that is more susceptible to convincing me than saying we're all going to die in 12 years if we don't do it. However, I think
that has never been said.
The real issue
No,
is
I want you to
actually
say it's
the way
not
to
true.
fight
Some people.
You keep lying. I want you to sit here and say it's not true to us right now.
Yeah,
I don't want you to continue until you admit that because I'm tired of sitting here and listening.
You guys never listened to AOC or what?
Yeah, I mean, people on Twitter
She
say
said
that.
we're gonna die in 12 years.
She's
I'm
never
pretty
said
sure
we're
she
gonna-
has. Somebody was just questioning whether she said that Miami was going to be underwater in a few years, and she said that too. And here's the other thing.
AOC,
Right now, the way to deal with China, it's not to invest in renewable energy by the government. It's actually to encourage fossil fuel development, which is what we're doing under Trump, which is fantastic. America is not only energy independent now, we're actually going towards energy dominance. And I think that's the real way to go against China is to do the exact opposite, is to unleash a fossil fuel development. And frankly,
Wait, what about Russia,
one of the other
Venezuela, and Saudi
things, like,
Arabia?
so let's, if you guys are right that Miami is going to be underwater in a couple of years, why do all of the millionaires and billionaires and Barack Obama buying a house close to the beach, and all the insurance companies and banks, and why are all they not concerned about Miami being underwater in a couple of years?
It's
Because
like,
they're
it's going to
confident
be
we're gonna
Miami
fix it.
is as far as I'm concerned, Miami is not going to go anywhere. What's going to happen is it's going to get much more expensive and unpleasant to live there. Like, you're right to the extent that there's so much property value and interest there that it's not like one day people are going to say, well, the water's risen an inch, we're all going to bail now. I mean, that's economically very difficult to do, but it's going to cost a lot more to live in places like that. It's going to be hotter and more miserable, and you're going to have to start building seawalls in vulnerable places to keep out rising tides. So, like, yeah, you're right that people aren't going to abandon those places, but it's going to get much more expensive and difficult to live in them. I mean, Miami already floods, during pretty basic rainstorms. Its infrastructure gets overwhelmed and it floods. So, like, this notion that it's not already a problem, I mean, it is a problem.
Okay, so you disagree with AOC on that too, then? That's
Look,
fine.
I have no interest in her opinions on this stuff. She seems to me to be trending toward the commie scale, and trending toward the commie side of things in terms of a lot of her opinions. I'm not going to stand by her when I'm saying that climate change is nevertheless real just because AOC has a lot of bad ideas. I mean, just because she has bad ideas doesn't invalidate climate change, and to raise her as a straw man for that. I mean, climate change was a thing long before she was a part of American politics. So just because she's wrong about a lot of her ideas,
Well, I bring her up because you guys keep saying nobody says that. Nobody says that.
You're right that there are people on Twitter, for example,
opposite.
who say things like everybody's going to be dead and whatever, but that's even if AOC says it, all right, most people I don't think are saying that climate change is going to scour the earth of human life.
But you are. You basically just said it, Bastiat. You basically said we're facing dire consequences.
Some people are going to die as a result of climate change.
There you go.
For
See?
example,
Yeah.
some people are. That's very
Robin
different than
said
saying
it's a pretty
everybody's
weather
going to die. That is a radically different statement. Obviously, that's a different
What are we
statement.
doing?
just
And
some
not
people
just human
die.
life, by the way, not just human life, as somebody pointed out here, very importantly, not just human life, like whole ecosystems that human life is dependent upon are also going to suffer. And a lot of
How did those-
species
Okay,
will
let me
be
ask you this.
scoured from the planet because they won't have the ability
Okay.
to adapt to climate change
Let
like we
me
will.
ask you this then. How did
Yeah.
those species and ecosystems survive the medieval warm period and the Holocene maximum, both of which were hotter than the Earth is now?
Look, a lot of them didn't. And the difference is those weren't caused by human beings, right? So the Earth can adapt to its own changes. It cannot adapt to our changes.
Well, that's not necessarily.
I mean,
true.
now just to be clear, it can't adapt to our changes
yeah.
in our lifetime, right?
Our
So
life
things are
won't
going to, I
adapt.
guess eventually the Earth would adapt, but like the negative
they didn't
impacts are
need-
going to
they
come at
didn't-
us a lot
They
sooner
didn't
than that's
adapt
gonna
to
happen.
those changes in the
Right.
medieval era. It wasn't a long enough change across enough generations to cause proper adaptation. Mostly it just, the changes reverted, right? The warming period stopped, species died out, and then they stopped dying out when the period went. There was a time enough for acclimation, but none for actual adaptation. So there's no real argument to be made in terms of, right, like, yes, natural selection, unless this goes on for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Okay.
If not,
As
leading
long,
into
I mean,
thousands
so
of
all
years.
right. So as long as we all agree that the polar bears are going to be just fine, even if
Here we
we get a
go.
little
Here
bit
we
warmer,
go.
then
Here
we'll be
we
good.
go.
They might not be, right?
No,
And there's no going
that-
back if they die.
Yeah,
Let
nothing
me
else says
just-
amount to that. And by the way, in terms of national security thinking, it's also worth remembering that as the ice caps melt, that's going to benefit chiefly Russia. In terms of countries that are now going to have more ports and more trade access, Russia stands, as far as I can see, is the only country that might actually benefit from climate change. Everybody else, and maybe I guess Canada, I don't know. Everybody
No,
else
lots of
seems
countries
to be like they're going to be set back considerably by it. So
Well, I just want to give Lecture a little credit here. Not a little. I want to give Lecture credit. Obviously, he's got a viewpoint that is in the minority, and he's willing to come
wrong.
here and talk to us about it and listen. He's going to push back like any of us would. I don't think Lecture is going to walk away from even the best arguments saying you guys are right, I'm wrong. There's a lot of people out there that think like Lecture and have read what he's read. And so I appreciate Lecture coming here and speaking to us and not losing his mind. And I appreciate everyone on this panel for having a civil conversation about this. You know what I mean? Like, it might be infuriating to some people out there, but there are people out there that believe what Lecture believe, and they live amongst us, and they're our neighbors, and we want to be able to talk about this.
No
I think
problem.
it's fascinating.
you.
I like to
Appreciate that.
see Bastiat and LCTRfan because they're both lawyers going at it. So you see
You know, TreeofLogic. I talked to Touring News. I was like, "When are you going to talk to LCTRfan?" He said, "I'm not debating LCTRfan until I'm prepared to beat him." He said, "I'm not doing it until I've researched every shred of it." I was like, "Oh shit!" Okay. I was like, "All right,
Well, now,
all right."
well, now he knows
Oh!
if he sees this. Now he knows all my arguments and all my
Yeah,
questions.
yeah.
So I've only got a couple. I've only got a couple left. I've got a couple of other really good gotcha questions and stuff, but only a
Polar
few.
bears.
Change your minds to
die.
fuck over Russia, you know?
AFC's the
Yeah.
devil. Now he has all
Well,
your tricks.
And think
Let's
about
rev that
that.
Cold War back up.
If Lecture wasn't out here giving his point of view, then someone like Turing wouldn't have the motivation to go research even further and be able to dispel even more what he believes are myths and many of us out there and challenge these points. You know what I mean? So
What a good argument for freedom of speech.
there you go. So we have about 30 minutes. This has been awesome so far. I'm a boomer, so I don't stay up too late here, and I don't want to make you guys all stay up. So tomorrow's a big special day for me in Congress, and we will be celebrating the impeachment of Donald John Trump.
Is that what you think is going to happen?
Do you
Got
think
him.
it's not
You
gonna
have a
happen?
cake? You have a cake? What do you have prepared, guy? What do you
Got
have?
him. So there's a whole
celebration?
bunch of storylines with some Democrats not going to vote for it? Are any Republicans going to vote for it? What's going to happen in the Senate trial? Are they going to bring witnesses? So I just got curious if anybody who's been a little quieter on this topic wants to give their opinions on this whole impeachment thing.
I mean, do y'all really think guys are going to get Donald Trump out of office and he's not going to get reelected? That's my only question I get asked.
Ooh,
Do you really think all of this is going to stop him from getting reelected in 2020?
I don't think the Senate's going to kick him out. I think if somehow a miracle happened.
No, the Senate is absolutely Pixie, because the Senate is dominated by the Republican majority, and Turtle McConnell, I call him the Turtle. Turtle said he's not going to cater to the Democratic side.
Mm-hmm.
Of him,
Well,
so
but-
you know, so he's going to.
He said he's not even going to allow a fair trial, which is a different thing entirely. Which
It
is
doesn't
really,
matter. The thing about it is that this is just
It
a
could
waste
matter.
of time. Y'all not gonna get Trump out of there, and he's gonna win 2020. And there's a strong chance, because of all of this, that the Democrats are gonna lose the House.
Ooh, I don't know about that one, but
I don't know.
there's a
Let's
chance.
put some money on it, baby. Come on,
There's
put some money on it.
I'd be down to put some money on that one.
I'll
but-
put some money on it. I'll put some fucking money down.
But look, you're right. I don't think they're going to remove him, but they
won't.
stopped the scheme that he was running to try to fix the 2020 race. This was his little scheme
What scheme?
to get
Come on.
Ukraine to
What scheme?
announce
Come
that
on.
investigation was taking place against his rival, his political rival.
What?
The scheme.
Ukraine? You keep saying what? Like you? No.
What?
Pro quo, Ukraine.
This process also
You sound
ensured
like
that
Lexus
this process
fan.
also helped ensure that $400 million in sorely needed defense money went to our allies in Ukraine to help oppose
Right.
Russia again. So it was good for that.
You're a Ukraine denier,
Right.
like a climate change denier. Is that...
He did
Y'all
not
haven't
release.
not realized that everything y'all threw at Trump did not stick. Okay, and you don't realize that you are basically energizing his base. Do you see how much money you're making this man? Okay, and also just out of principle, people are so
Where would it
tired
stick? Where would it
out
stick?
of the bullshit that they're just going to vote for Trump out of spite.
Where would it
Because
stick? If it were to stick somewhere, where would the stuff that we throw at Trump, right? Where would that stick?
I do know
In an
what you got. You know what? You know what?
In an impeachment trial.
No,
Right?
no,
No,
not
but that's no.
impeachment,
If you're accusing
No.
someone of high treason, right, or whatever you're accusing Trump of, or campaign finance violations, or quid pro quos with Ukraine, or breaking the emoluments clause, right? The place where it would stick would be in an impeachment trial in the Senate, a trial that McConnell says he will not allow to proceed fairly. So it on the one hand, it's fair that you say, okay, the things that you've thrown at him don't stick. They can't stick. The establishment doesn't let them stick. And the entire the grand pomp that we sort of led up to with the impeachment,
Can you
where we
guys
have an
tell me the
opportunity to have a
specific
trial,
crime?
is being
Can-
dismissed by the establishment.
Can you tell me, just help me out here, to tell me the
Yeah.
specific crime that Donald Trump committed as president? As president.
You don't have to commit a crime.
Well, that's
he
yeah.
has
But
to
anyways,
Yeah, we can
And
impeach him
that's-
just for
that's
like,
like
Why we
too.
gonna win, man? This is
No,
why we
can I,
fucking win.
may I? Requesting.
What are you gonna
learn
win?
shit from the UK.
No, no,
listen,
your
listen.
question
You
was
guys are
wrong.
gonna
No,
be
no,
just
listen.
like the people
Give me
in
let me have the answer. No way.
You see how people are salty over there in the UK
and
talking about how did the
receiving
conservatives
something
do
of
it so
value
big,
from
man?
a
How did
foreign
they did
government
that? And we
in
guys
the
gonna be
process of a
crying
campaign.
just like them over here in America come 2020. You watch.
It is
Y'all gonna
illegal.
need, man,
It
y'all
is
gonna need so
illegal.
many antidepressant pills when he wins. I don't know what the fuck. Oh my God.
Here,
Oh my
okay.
God. Oh,
The crime in question here is how do you call it? Extorting like a foreign government for personal reasons, right? I don't know the exact terminology, but that is a crime. The people saying that technically you're right, you don't need to commit a crime to get impeached. That's true, but I don't like that argument. I don't want to go down that way because I think like there was a crime committed here that we can like talk about, you know? Even if you're technically right.
What's the specific crime? I didn't get it.
I
I'm sorry.
just wanted to correct what she was saying.
Okay, I'll find the
one would just
specific-
be campaign finance violations, requesting and receiving aid from a foreign government, right? Like in both the case of the Russian hacking incident and Ukraine, requesting and receiving, right? In the case of Russia where he receives, and the case of Ukraine where he requests again, even just the request, the attempt, the conspiracy to commit that violation is against the law.
well,
And if you're going to argue that it's not something of value that he's requesting,
No.
dirt
For
on his
my
political enemy.
Yeah.
as far as the Ukraine, I'm not. I don't know that one, so I thought maybe LCTRfan can give insight on that one. But from my understanding, is that it is not against the law. And please correct me if I'm wrong. It is not against the law for President Trump to ask another political person to investigate something in their country. That's not against the law. Now I could be wrong, and I'm
No,
open to be
that's
wrong.
right.
Quid pro
No,
quo.
that's right.
Yeah.
And in fact, we have a treaty with Ukraine that actually calls for both of our countries to investigate potential crimes and investigate corruption together and to cooperate and stuff. And so it's perfectly in line, perfectly okay. And in fact, Trump actually had a duty to the office to actually ask them to help investigate potential crimes by Joe Biden, and Joe Biden's not above the law. Joe Biden is
No, but
Joe Biden's not
fine
immune
to
from
ask.
prosecution.
It's not fine to hold over $400 million of aid before asking, right? Because then that makes it extortion.
Well,
Indeed.
So
and
do you
that was
think-
congressionally
Well,
appropriated
that's
money
quid
for
pro
a
quo.
specific purpose entirely unrelented to Joe Biden or whatever, you're
so do you
referencing
guys
there.
think then when Joe Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion in loan guarantees to Ukraine that was also extortion and that Joe Biden should be
That's
thrown
not
in
what
jail
we're
for
talking
that?
about.
We're not talking about throwing
We're
anybody in
not
jail,
talking
but in
about
terms
that.
of
Good try, though.
investigating Joe Biden, I'll do that.
Yeah,
you
sure.
can
I'll
have Joe.
throw Joe
You can
under
have
the
Joe.
bus.
If we get Trump, you can have Joe. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make that trade actually.
But also,
yeah,
also,
yeah.
it's fair, but if Joe
Can we
Biden
hold-
was conditioning access to this $1 billion
we-
based
Finn, but-
on something similar, then yeah, that's a problem.
An important distinction here as well is that he required in the quid pro quo, there was a requirement to publicly announce these investigations, not just to hold these investigations. So I agree. If you're saying, right, okay, he has a duty to this office to actually have these investigations conducted, even whether or not he's withholding aid, and you're like, oh, well, he didn't intend to withhold. All of that aside, he asked them to publicly announce it immediately prior to the 2020 elections, right? So that's not right. You can't like tread in a line of, oh, this is
But
not
that's not
This is
illegal.
not a political. No, but it is. It
That's
is
pretty
because he's
damning.
extorting it for political gain. That is illegal.
well, here's
That's
my
why
question.
he's being impeached, because it's against the law.
Why didn't he do this in 2017 and 2018, lecture?
Well, it's frankly the reason he withheld the aid is because I don't know the timeline. I think the aid it wasn't appropriated in 2017, and Trump was actually going through all of this stuff earlier. But one of the primary reasons is because the Mueller investigation wasn't completed until much later in time, and a lot of and in fact, Trump's very first comment to the President Zelensky was actually about getting involved in the 2016 election interference by the Ukrainians, and it's perfectly rational for Trump to want them to make a public statement that they're investigating corruption, because that's actually that's how you provide enforceability to some of these provisions, because once they publicly announce it, then they actually have to do it. And it's common for American foreign policy to want countries to not be corrupt, and if we're going to give countries military aid, we want them to not be corrupt, and it's perfectly reasonable for Trump to want.
Congress approved that money. He was supposed to give it to them, right? Like, you can't just withhold that money.
No, he can.
Like,
the president has wide. Actually, the president's power is at its highest in foreign policy.
The president.
And
Sorry,
he certainly, I mean, and that's not, I mean, if that was a crime, then that's what would be in the articles of impeachment, that he couldn't have done it at all. That's not what that's not what the Democrats are alleging. The Democrats are alleging an improper purpose. It all goes to intent. Bastiat knows this. It's all about intent. You have to prove that in Trump's mind, Trump was doing this for the purpose of interfering in the 2020 election.
Just to be clear,
and without, if Trump's purpose for doing this was to further America's national security interests, then there's nothing wrong with it.
Just to be clear, since you've invoked this, since you invoked me here,
yeah.
the president does have the power to impound for a period of 45 days under the Impoundments Act of like 1974. I'm not 100% on the name of the law here, but it dates back to the Nixon administration, because President Nixon tried to do this a lot. He would try to impound funds that were appropriated for a specific purpose. He just impound them endlessly and basically force Congress to do something about it. So under that law, the president has 45 days to impound. He can request Congress give him more time, but if Congress ignores him, he has to disperse the funds. The funds were not dispersed in this situation until, I believe, the 55th day, and by that point in time, the investigation which prompted the dispersal of funds ultimately had already begun. So I think it further demonstrates his nefarious intent in this situation, that he held on to the money and only let it go after the 45-day period, when it was clear that this investigation was basically beginning because of this impoundment of funds. So I think that only furthers the argument for intent, personally.
Well,
he's still going to win 2020.
And I'll drop the link to this impoundment law so you guys can check it out.
He's still going to win. It doesn't matter. He's still going to win 2020. You know what I'm saying?
Another interesting wrinkle is that Donald Trump wants witnesses to come in the Senate. He wants a full-throated defense made of him in front of the world by witnesses. And that is in conflict with what the Senate Republicans want. They're concerned it'll be damaging to him, and that'll trickle down the ticket and damage them in turn.
It will be. It will be damaging. He doesn't realize that, and maybe it won't be, honestly, because a lot of things that we have thought would be damaging to him have not been damaging in the past.
Exactly, and please, guys, now you gotta
understand by the pussy shit, like all of that, like all of it.
Here's something else I want to bring your attention to. You guys are not aware of this, and I actually talked about this on Twitch. I was saying that basically when you all are distracted with the impeachment, Donald Trump is packing the federal judges, okay?
That's true.
He's actually passing some executive orders, and you guys are not even catching him because he's, you too busy with the impeach. And it's like, and here's the thing is Donald Trump is shaking and moving and doing shit right in your face, and you're not even aware of it.
No, but the fact that you're in support of that kind of like outrage.
I didn't say I was in support of it. I'm just giving you. I'm just giving you. No,
are you?
No,
are you? You seem proud.
Here's no. So you stop projecting, okay? And you lefties, stop fucking goddamn assuming what the fuck I am and ask me and say, okay. So here's the thing. Here's the thing. By the way, here's the thing. Here's what y'all want. Here's the thing y'all should know about me. I am not part of Cult 45. Did you know that? Did you know that?
Part of what?
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm talking
Cult 45. Oh, I see. I thought you were talking about the gun. Cult 45.
No, I'm not part of Cult 45. Okay. So the thing about it is that I used to be a diehard Trump supporter until he started acting like a Democrat. Then I got off the Trump train. Okay. So the thing about it is, but even though I am not a supporter of Trump, I recognize what's going on both sides of the aisle and know that he's still going to win 2020. I am not saying I approve of what he's doing. There's a lot of shit I have judged and actually criticized Trump for doing. Okay. But the thing about it is that I am not delusional in not knowing that he is going to win.
You keep saying it like it's an absolute certainty.
Wait, where that money at? Can we get that money? Okay, so I need to make some money.
Oh man, I really have to say, I love that. I love that. I liked Trump until he turned into a Democrat. That was so good.
Yeah.
Well, if
So good.
Democrats were fair-minded, they'd give
So
him all
good.
kinds of credit, especially for him being anti-war. He's the most anti-war president we've ever had, and he gets no credit from Democrats. But let me just say on this impeachment thing, even if everything you guys are saying about Trump's intent, and the withholding of the aid, and when he released it, and that it was a nefarious purpose as opposed to him releasing it as part of a way to basically fight back against false allegations, which is what the whistleblower complaint was, is false allegations. Even if that's all true, even if Trump purposefully was withholding aid and there was a quid pro quo that they had to investigate Biden, and Donald Trump was doing it with an eye towards the 2020 election, that's not an impeachable offense. You know why? Because Trump has all of the backing and legitimacy of the American people behind him when he's draining the swamp, and Joe Biden is a swamp rat.
Wait, was that a joke?
Lecture fan, I have to ask you, are you auditioning for Fox News right now? Because you are on point. I do not mean that. I just want to be clear. I do not mean that as an insult in any way. You are on point. The way you delivered that was just mwah.
Yeah.
So good.
No, thank you, Bastiat. No, it's funny actually a lot. When in real life, when I talk to people and I say stuff, they're like, "You've been watching too much Sean Hannity, and I'm like, actually, I thought of that myself. I'm glad that you appreciate and think that I could potentially be like Sean Hannity.
Oh,
No,
Lord,
you are better.
was that not a
Sean
meme?
Hannity.
Can
I'm
we
pretty
be?
sure Sean Hannity
Can
was-
we clear the air there? Because I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I don't know
I'm
if that's a meme or
uncomfortable
not.
not knowing because I don't. It's really hard for me to tell.
I don't think it's a meme.
I think he's
I don't
serious.
think it's
Yeah,
a
I think
meme.
he's
Are you
serious.
serious?
I'm not-
Yeah, he's
no.
serious. Just like
He's
That's
Bastiat.
serious.
Yeah, it
I'm
is.
not. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not memeing. Most, occasionally I'll say something like sound like me, but I'm not memeing. I don't think Lecture Fan is either.
No, I really do. I really do think that Joe Biden is corrupt, and I have no problem with Donald Trump trying to drain the swamp by draining
You have
out
no
swamp
problem
rats
with
like
him
Joe Biden.
extorting foreign governments and withholding aid for personal political gain.
No, that's
Because it affects Joe
No.
Biden. No, but if he were doing that, right? Let's live in my hypothetical fairyland, right? Let's live in the lefty paradise.
Yeah.
If that were true, if he were extorting foreign governments for personal aid, would you or would you not be against that? Even if it coincidentally affected Joe Biden?
Well, I mean, I guess I guess I wouldn't be if it was solely that. If there was some incidental actual corruption by Joe Biden that he was actually going at, and that's why I said there was some portion of, if it was some portion of Trump's mind that he was like, yeah, this might help me politically, but there was also maybe even a tiny portion of his mind that said, you know what, this is actually really sketchy, and Joe Biden is a little bit corrupt, and I think we ought to investigate Joe Biden, as long as there was some inkling of, hey, this guy's a swamp rat.
primarily
Why couldn't he
motivated
have done
by
it without
personal
extorting
generous.
Ukraine? Why couldn't he have, basic? Why did he have to extort Ukraine to do this shit? That's what I'm wondering here, right? Because it's one thing to be like, hey, can you investigate? And it's another thing to be withholding funds to force a foreign nation to comply with you.
Well, I honestly
Yeah.
think that so Donald Trump has been very consistent on his foreign policy with respect to American aid. He is very sick of the United States paying for everybody's aid and not getting anything in return, and Europe not paying their fair share. And it's completely consistent with not only Donald Trump's overall foreign policy, but with his respect to his specific Europe policy and NATO policy, for Trump to want Germany and France and other EU countries to pitch into this. And if you actually read the transcript, Donald Trump mentions in that call that Germany and France are not doing enough to help out Ukraine, and Donald Trump is sick of America protecting Europe's ass all the time with no help from the Europeans. So that's why he withheld the aid. And that's why it
never
happened.
said why he withheld the aid. Let's start
And-
there.
No, he did.
But
He said he
anyways,
withheld aid because he wanted Europe to pitch in. He's sick of America
I
paying
read the
for everything.
Okay, let's find the transcript right now. He
Read the
never
transcript.
specified why he withheld it. But anyways,
But more importantly, the reason
we
the reason
live in
have to
a
do it to Ukraine.
democracy, okay? We
live in a
a
republic.
democracy where we
No,
have
we don't.
three branches of the
We
government.
live in a democratic republic. We do
Oh,
not live in a
democratic
democracy.
republic. Okay, we still go.
Constitutional
Regardless,
republic.
okay, regardless, right? Trump is not a fucking king. I am happy you have 3 branches of government because they're supposed to supposedly, theoretically, even each other out. Just because Trump has a personal vendetta or whatever doesn't mean he can just be like, fuck Congress, I am not going to deliver this aid. That would make him a fucking king. That would make him above Congress. And I don't think that's right, okay? Like, I'm not here to live in a dictatorship or in a one-man state. Like, what the hell?
Well, why don't the Democrats impeach him for just the simple act of withholding aid then? Why do they have to tack on all of this quid pro quo and abuse of power stuff?
I think that's I think that includes all of that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
It
part
includes
of it,
all of it.
it's a
all
nice
of it, yeah.
package.
Yeah, I
It's
do
high-
want
high
to.
crime,
Oh my
it's high
gosh,
crime.
Trump wanted other
but-
European
but-
countries to
it's-
contribute.
Yeah, let me
Impeach
push back
headline.
on that notion
It's
too.
a headline
Like
as
that
well.
European
High
countries
crimes
are not.
and misdemeanors. The misdemeanors are included in the high crimes,
Yeah.
in both of which are in the in the impeachment proceedings.
Yeah, I
Both.
I guess I would ask, like, what's the value of even this discussion when it seems like impeachment is inevitable? And even if you don't concede that impeachment is inevitable, removal from office is, come on, let's be fucking realistic, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, it's
He's not going to get
Well,
removed
not
from
likely.
office.
No, of course not.
He's
Right.
not going to get removed.
what are the odds? So
That's my question is, the Democrats have known from the very beginning that this was not going to result in his removal. So if you knew it was doomed to failure from the start, why would you proceed moving
Because they
forward
wanna
with
be on
something
the
that's
right
going to
side.
take
There's
a
a
bunch
value
of
to
time,
Very
and a
good
bunch of
question. Very
money
good question.
when you
There's
know
a
it's
value
going to
to
fail.
process, even if you don't think that the outcome
Agreed.
is likely to go
what
your
is
way.
what is the value,
That's it.
Bastia? I'm asking.
What's that?
I'm asking someone I know.
The value to
right?
process is one, at least through the impeachment process, all of this stuff has been laid out before the American people to make their own
Sure.
decisions
I'm
about.
more aware.
The investigation has been very thorough into this issue now. The president's allies in Congress have at least had to answer and for some of what he has done, and they will ultimately have to go out and vote as to their opinion on this, and their name will be recorded in line with basically protecting this administration forever. So to the extent
Democrats
that
are
more
literally
comes
leaving
out
the party.
someday,
Yeah,
even
you
if
guys
even
have
if
one
you think
somebody
impeachment is not going
defect
anywhere.
and leave the Democratic Party and join the Republican
Well,
side.
Well,
I
You
think
hasn't
guys
that's
are
gone yet.
moving all
every
around, dude.
Republican who votes to keep him in office is now connected to him for the duration of his term. Come what may, they will be responsible for
fair.
all of his doings in
Agreed.
office now. By
Which
virtue
is
of
great
keeping
because
there.
his numbers are up.
People,
His
no,
poll
no,
numbers
but
are up.
the people who refuse,
Yeah, they are.
And one
the
other
people
point,
who
though,
refuse to have a
yeah.
fair trial, the people who refuse to
Yeah.
hold a fair trial in the impeachment proceedings will have that. That is now documented.
Yeah.
It's not something that's like out in the open. It's not a what if. It's not, oh,
Okay,
I didn't do this. I wouldn't have done this.
documented,
It's
but
reported.
here's my question, North. Love the hat, by the way. So what? So, you know, saying but it's not going to
The traitors,
get his-
have been written down. Their names are known. They're on the
History.
list.
Okay, so in a more important question, do you
That's
think this
spooky when you put it
tree
that way.
High
earlier?
crimes makes them traitors to this country.
Well, I don't
You
know.
want to say something?
I don't know about it. I don't know about
Yeah,
that.
lecture.
Defending no.
Lecture-
I would argue, and I would insist on this, that in like not having a fair trial in an impeachment proceeding and insisting that you will not have a fair trial in an impeachment proceeding is if it's not sedition like sedative, it's or whatever that word is, it's
Yeah.
fucking it's
Seditious.
definitely goddamn traitorous.
Well,
Or like it's subverting like the spirit of the Constitution.
No, but you
Yeah, I'll
understand
go with
that
that.
you guys
I'll go
feel
with
that
that.
way. You understand that you have half of America that totally disagrees with you, and they actually have the impeachment on ignore.
That disagrees with the process of that there should be a fair trial. What
No,
part of America
no,
thinks that there shouldn't be a
actually,
fair
they
trial?
disagree with the whole impeachment process.
That's
They don't-
fine. That's fine. But I don't think anyone should disagree that if impeachment is brought to the Senate, that a fair trial should be conducted, which is the thing that Mitch McConnell said he would not do.
Right. But
And
That's
guess
what-
what? And guess what? People who support Trump and the Republicans stand behind the turtle.
Yeah, but that's not the way. It shouldn't be about like political. Like it
No,
shouldn't
it
be a football
It's
team.
absolutely true.
Well,
In the way that
here's-
you
it
conduct
should be.
trials in the United States, that's bullshit.
It
I
should
agree.
be. I think what the Senate's doing. There's no obligation for the Senate to take up with the very serious and somber tone impeachment trial when it's an illegitimate process from the start, where the Democrats didn't follow norms and due process procedures, and so
How is this
the
process illegitimate?
the
how?
Republicans are supposed to treat something as serious when it's a hoax. No, it should be
How
treated
would
as
a
a
How
hoax
is it a hoax?
clearly establish that Trump did something he wasn't supposed to do, period?
No, that hasn't been established.
So wait, so you think that him going against Congress, releasing the money after the talk, specifically after asking for a personal favor, you think that
It wasn't a personal favor. He asked for a favor
He
for
literally
us.
asked for a favor.
Yeah,
For
he
us.
And he sent his
United States.
personal attorney over there to do it. Rudy.
I would like,
Any Rudy fans in chat?
I would like everyone to go follow twitch.tv/A4Andre for us. It's good for us. I'm not it's a matter of like, for us. I want to grow my, and that really has been Trump's presidency. It's very transactional. He only does what's good for Donald Trump. And he can put an American flag behind him when he says it, but I think you're the disillusioned one if you really believe it's for us. Now, since I have the floor, I want to ask again, because this is the TreeofLogic and LCTRfan. Like, you really think, so in my mind, I think that this impacts Trump's credibility, whether he wins or not. But I think you guys would argue that it sort of bolsters the campaign in 2020. You don't think that this? I mean,
oh my God, it's not even making a dent. It's just increasing the numbers.
No. I bet it's like taking momentum. You think this is giving him? You think now people think he's the Teflon Don, as my boy Guy said. You think he's invincible now, and most Americans see him that way?
I'll let LCTRfan answer his reason why, but I'm gonna tell you what I see. What I see is people who are so sick of the PC, the culture from the left, the cancel culture, the whole deplatforming. They're so tired of this shit that they're just going to vote, and they love the way Trump trolls and how it triggers the shit out of you guys. Okay, I mean, this man does some stupid shit on Twitter, and you guys make that shit the front page news. CNN, Don Lemon lost his shit when Trump put his head on Thanos and snapped his fingers and made Pelosi and what's the other guy who looks like his grandmother? They make them disappear.
Engaging in such like debaucherous fucking
you guys
Twitter rants. Like, that's bullshit.
No. Here's the thing: you guys lose your shit when Trump memes, and basically because a lot of people on the right don't know how to fight. I should know, because basically I clowned them for being cowards and getting their ass beat for wearing a mega hat. My thing is, like, if you're gonna wear a mega hat, at least learn how to fucking fight. You know, you don't have to get your ass beat all the goddamn time. But here's the thing. So they look to Trump and live vicariously to Trump to own the libs. So to vote for Trump is to own the libs, to own you guys, and that's just what it's all about.
I agree with TreeofLogic. I honestly think that.
I think there is a huge amount of just, I want to own the libs. I don't care what else, as long as I own those libs.
Yeah,
I mean, they're better than me. They get better than me.
What kind of life is that, though, Tree?
Yeah,
what kind of life is
I
that?
don't know how you can take your vote and cast it for that reason.
They hate
what about
you.
you? What about you?
I don't like y'all either, but I'm beginning to love.
Come on now.
Wow.
No. Some of y'all growing on me. No. I have to admit, I started to my heart started to soften a little bit for some of y'all. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, I'll take that.
And some of y'all not.
Nah, you're wrong for that.
Some of y'all.
Notice she's not saying names.
Lecture, you think this gives Trump momentum? You think this makes him more successful, or potentially more successful in the 2020?
So I assume you're asking me, since you were asking us both. But anyway, let me just say something here really quick. I've always said, kind of from the very beginning, that the 2020 election is going to come down mostly to who the Democrats nominate. And so I think, and there's a lot of other things going on here that are impacted by what's going on. Like the incredible week Trump had last week with getting the Space Force passed, getting border wall funding, getting USMCA finally agreed to by Congress.
Incredible.
Very weird sort of that would happen during impeachment week. And I think that plays into it. I think if you actually go back to the beginning of this impeachment thing, there was two primary factors that motivated this impeachment thing. Number one is Nancy Pelosi wanting to keep her job because she was getting extreme pressure from the far left to do impeachment, and if she didn't, she was gonna lose the support of the Democrat Party, and so Nancy Pelosi wanted to keep her job. Secondly, and primarily, the Democratic field is so incredibly weak. This is one of the weakest fields I think a major party's seen in their candidates for a long time. That I think Nancy Pelosi decided at that point that she needs to do the Hail Mary pass and do the impeachment, because if she doesn't, and Al Green admitted this publicly, if they don't impeach him, then the Democrats are going to lose. Now, I think that impeachments that fail, just like what happened with Bill Clinton, typically support the president, because the thought process that most Americans are going to have is that, okay, you guys knew from the beginning that this was going to fail. You could have done all of these things that are good for the country, and instead you chose to impeach. That's why I think this is why this is kind of all connected. That's why the Democrats decided to pass USMCA, pass the Space Force, do all these things make Trump have the best week of his presidency last week. And so now Democrats can say, oh, well, look, we did impeachment and we also did USMCA. We also did Space Force. And so I think all of these things kind of play into it. I think what the Democrats are hoping is that they can, fight off those arguments about wasting time by saying they did these things and stain Trump enough with the impeachment that it actually hurts Trump. But I do think it's going to backfire, because politics 101 is always about getting out your base to vote. And I think the Democrats are in between a rock and a hard place with their candidates. They've got Joe Biden as the front runner, who does not excite the Democratic base. People are not going to be excited.
Stupid shit.
People are not going. And if the Democrats then go with one of the other non-Joe Biden candidates, they're going to alienate huge chunks of the American populace who aren't that extreme. And meanwhile, Donald Trump's base is super fired up and is going to be very motivated to vote, sort of regardless of who the Democrats get, because of this impeachment. So I think you take all of those sort of different factors in together, and it looks like a Trump 2020 landslide.
So
I have a question.
Now,
I have a
the numbers
question.
have been going against Trump recently. So you think they're going to flip sometime next year?
You guys don't look at the polls, because remember that the polls said that Hillary is going to win by a landslide, and look what happened. But I have a question. Are you guys still devoted on, or are you together on vote blue no matter who? Because I keep hearing people saying if Bernie don't win, you're not voting. So is that
Party unity.
what is the
Party unity? It's party unity. How dare you? I'll leave right now.
I would
Someone say
definitely
they're gonna
vote.
red.
Well, I'm definitely voting for whoever the Democrat is right now. But even if Secretary Clinton enters the race, who I
Which
love
is a
and adore,
possibility.
I'm a big
No.
supporter
Oh,
of the
now
Clinton
that's true.
Foundation, ladies and gentlemen. But anyway,
I hope
no
she
matter
gets
who.
in
And
that
I do want to
shit,
say,
boy.
though, the polls this time around, I don't know that the polls were wrong. It was what people chose to do with the polls in terms of saying, these polls show that there's like a
Bastiat, come on now. They were saying that Trump was going to lose to. Okay, go ahead.
Well, what you're referencing is that the New York Times said there's a 97% chance that Trump's going to lose.
Not only them though,
based on the polls,
CNN. Now I don't know about real clear politics. I don't.
Well, what
know
I'm
about
saying
them,
is,
but
all I'm saying is that
that
the people who aggregated the polls and who said they mean this were mistaken. But I don't believe the polls themselves were mistaken. So.
Wait a minute, you're saying that the polls lied, that Hillary's supposed to have won the electoral vote?
No, I think the polls were wrong. That Trump had a 97% chance of losing. The polls were not wrong though about like who was going to win what state or
the poll. Most of them. If I don't remember seeing any poll that said. Now I could be wrong. That said that Trump had a chance. It was always in Hillary was going to win by a landslide.
97% chance of winning doesn't mean that it's like a 97-3 like split.
The
it was
odds
always
of
like
winning,
the odds are in favor here, and here. So
I didn't see any polls that said that Trump was going to basically win. It was all about Hillary. And so what I'm saying is that I thought that should be a lesson of we shouldn't really cater to polls. Let's see what happens come after the election.
The aftermath of.
I don't know. I guess I'm generally skeptical of notions that real statistical data is just like, well, we don't really need to trust it, because I mean, if anything, polls are probably.
Well, I don't fucking trust it because it gave me
me.
I actually was depressed because I would listen to those polls. Then when I woke, because I didn't even watch the election, I went to sleep thinking that heifer was going to win. And then when I woke up and Trump won,
did you just call Secretary Clinton of the heroic Clinton Foundation a heifer?
Yeah, because that bitch lied about keeping hot sauce in her purse to pander to black people.
Let me tell you something about Hillary Clinton. She's a woman of integrity, grace, and goodwill, and I'm definitely not saying that because I'm worried she's going to murder me, okay?
Do not be victim number 70.
I will not be.
Well, listen, guys. It is now 10 p.m. on the West Coast. I always believe in leaving the people wanting more. We could go all night here. This has been a real fun group. But I say we go out on a high note here. So I wanted to say, first of all, thank you all for joining and keeping it civil and showing that people with such different political views can get along just fine and express themselves fully. I think that's really important. Everything that was said tonight is great, but it's the action, the visual of all of us coming together that really sends a big message. And I appreciate you guys all participating in that.
Yeah, this was super fun. I feel like
Actually, this
Yeah,
was
it
a fun
was.
group.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to get a good group like this again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
this
feel
is
like
the
this
best
was
group
one
you
of
ever
them.
had.
This was really a lot of fun. TreeofLogic,
Yeah,
it's really
it
nice
has.
to meet you. You've been a fucking
Nice to
super
meet
good.
you. I
Yeah,
like
it's
you.
just good to meet you, Trey. And
Nice to meet you too, Bastiat and
Yeah.
Andre.
Yeah.
Dude, you held it
Yeah.
down.
Yeah. This is definitely one of my
like this
favorite.
guy.
This is one of my favorite ones I've ever done.
And
for sure.
Oh, wow.
What is I'm sorry. I would
I
like to
agree.
know more about you, Dr. Leon. I'm sorry, am I pronouncing
Oh, ciphers.
ciphers?
Yeah, it's
Like
German.
a rap cipher.
Oh.
Well, he streams, so we're actually going to shout. Let's all do a shout out here. So, and I'll plug everybody's channels I'll plug everybody's channels in the chat. So, LCTRfan, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm LCTRfan. I'm a conservative, obviously. I stream every night and I do gaming on the weekend, so come check it out.
Awesome. And Leon, if you could give a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, my name is Leon Cyphers. I do a lot of podcasts, so I do a group with smaller streamers on Monday, and then Friday I work with Mindwaves, who couldn't be here tonight, and we do another podcast. So if that sounds like fun, stop by.
Awesome. Andre, always a pleasure.
Man, Guy, thanks for having me. Shout out to Kurishumo. Invite me to as many of these things. I always have a blast. If I can take a quick second, we did a charity in October we called it A4 Awareness, but two women, I play fighting games, two women at the largest fighting game tournament of the year were drugged. Actually, three people, two women and a guy. And then same thing happened at TwitchCon. Three more people were drugged. And we really wanted to do something about it. We raised a bunch of money and we're buying a bunch of these sip chips. They're drink testing kits. You can dip your finger in the drink. And then you can put it on the chip, and within 30 seconds, it tells you whether your drink is safe to consume or not. We are all done with that, but we raised a bunch of money. We're buying these chips, and we're going to take them to both TwitchCon and EVO next year to make partying and drinking safer. We're looking for another charity, another cause to fund in January. So all my revenue, like bits, donations, subs, ad revenue, I have a day job, so I don't need that shit. So we'll put that towards another A4 Awareness charity in January. So find me on Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn, MySpace, Instagram, Tinder. No, I've got a girlfriend, but seriously, find me wherever. Pitch your charity ideas. We definitely want to raise more money, bring light to more issues. A4 Awareness is important to me. We want to help. So yeah, thank you again for the time and the plug, Guy.
Awesome, dude. Yeah, I plugged his channel there in the chat. Check him out. Bastiat.
All right. So thanks again for the invite, Yuri, and thanks again to Kirshmo too for the invite and helping get this organized as well. The invisible hand behind so much of what we all do here on Political Twitch. So yeah, it was a blast being here as always. As I was saying before, I'm looking forward to the next one. And yeah, again, for those who may not know me or who may like me after all of those rants and raves. My name is Bastiat. You can find me on twitch.tv/BASTIAT. I'm a neoliberal corporate attorney. I work in the fossil fuel industry, and I love this great country of ours, the US of A. So definitely be sure to check it out sometime. We have a whole lot of fun talking about law and politics, economics, history, and the occasional conspiracy theory. So I hope to see you soon.
Awesome. And my favorite Puerto Rican on the platform, Pxie.
Hi, I'm Pxie. As you see, I really like talking politics and talking to new people online every day. You guys have been really fun to talk to. I really enjoyed our conversation today. And I actually have a podcast I host on Wednesdays as well, if anybody wants to look at it. You've been a really great host. I'm really important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Super good.
Yeah.
And,
Thanks.
Let me just say I really enjoyed tonight too, and I don't have any personal animus or ill will towards anybody on the stream. I love to get animated about politics, and I can get into it pretty viciously, but I hope nobody else feels any, negative feelings towards that. I don't feel negatively towards any of you, even if I got riled up and fired up on any of these things. And
that's what made it good, though.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, it was fun.
Serious? That's what it made.
Yeah.
You need the
Yeah.
content.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a
I
person
agree.
on the platform I disagree with more politically, but I could still consider a friend. So it's always fun talking to you, Lexi.
Cool.
And
Nice,
I'm
too.
really important. I think that's why folks like Granddad Christmas are so quick to tell me, tell I'm really important that I love him.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm in like with you, Granddad. I'm not ready for that
man.
yet, but I'm in
And
like with
I
you.
meant to say, LectureFan, great talking with you again. Leon, great talking with you too.
Oh, yeah.
Andre, it's always good to see you. Pixie, you too. Mage, by the way, LectureFan and I gotta, get you all the way on the law pill here. You definitely, you gotta. He's flirting with the idea. You should definitely go all in.
It's sitting there. The recommendations are filed away. It's
Good.
Wow.
Yeah. And
That's
Tree, it was such a pleasure to meet you. I hope we can talk again sometime.
Me
soon.
too. Yeah, I enjoyed you.
Cool. Well, we got 2 more left here. North and Mage. North, always a pleasure. Glad I got to talk to you. Glad it's interesting to see one of the 14 people still playing WoW Classic on Twitch. So.
No, I'm not even streaming it though. That's the problem. I can't stream it. It's impossible to stream because I do the same thing over and over and over again, 14 hours a day. And it's like I'll go live doing the thing that I'm doing. Like if I have like a small break from the shit that I'm grinding, I'll quickly I have to throw up my stream because it's like some break from the monotony. Either that or it's me getting drunk and screaming at everyone in my voice chat. Like those are the 2 things that I can currently do that are enough content to feed. So it's nice being honest. I'm still grinding that same thing. I've been in Alterac Valley for fucking 14 hours today, and I was doing it the entire fucking podcast. So thank you for having me on. It's breaking the monotony. It's a ton of fun. Tree, it was wonderful meeting you, LectureFan. Always. I'm not gonna say a pleasure. It's always interesting. It's always interesting when you're around. But I do enjoy it. So it is a pleasure. Andre, nice to meet you. Bastiat, always a pleasure. Pixie, of course, as well. Cypher's, nice to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you.
But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a ton of fun.
Awesome, man.
And I've learned a thing or two.
Yeah, that's what's great. And my newest crush, TreeofLogic. Thank you for coming on here. I dared her to come into my safe space.
Sure did. Talk
her
shit to
come
me
in.
in DMs, man.
I had to talk
Talk
some serious
major shit, dude. I just want to say I don't think you're ever gonna find a good chemistry, different opinions than this panel right here. I don't think you're gonna find one that's more entertaining. And even though we disagree, we still basically have respect for one another and we have fun with each other. And I'm sorry, you ain't gonna find it anymore. I mean, you try to.
This was impressive. This was impressive. It wasn't all lefties. I'm really impressed by that.
Yeah.
I was honestly floored. I was like, when I saw this many flags, I was like, holy shit! It's gonna be a good one, boy.
Yeah, man.
Well, I'm a big fan I'm a big believer in you got to be friends with people first before you can start talking about some real topics. You know what I mean? So I try really hard to make friends with people first, and then we can get into it.
Yeah. This was cool. And I'm on Twitch every Sunday at 8:00 p.m. Twitch.tv/TreeofLogic.
Awesome. So one last time,
I shot myself out. It's just North the Mage, just everything on every platform: Twitch, Twitter, Twitch and Twitter.
Not Tinder.
Awesome. Yeah, I put
Tinder,
everybody's
not yet. I'm thinking about that. I've been thinking about just re-uploading like pictures of me on Twitch onto my Tinder because I don't use it with the hat on.
Do it.
And just
With
be like,
the hat,
who's
man.
gonna bite on this? Who's gonna bite?
I'd
No one
swipe.
will, but who the
I'd
fuck's
swipe.
gonna bite?
I'd swipe.
Awesome. Well, I put everybody's links one more time in the chat. Give these folks a follow. These are some of the amazing people talking politics on this platform. And I'm really happy I got to meet all these people. And thank you guys all for hanging out in the chat and hanging out with us and great conversations out there. I'm going to end the call and I'll see you guys soon.
Thanks again.
Take it easy, man.
Yeah.
See ya.
Thanks, everybody.